The moment Daniel Hart discovered the hack targeting his boss, he had exactly 17 minutes to stop it, or watch her career burn. But here's the twist. The attacker wasn't some external threat. It was someone sitting 3 floors above him, plotting her destruction from inside the very company she'd dedicated 10 years to building. By morning, either Elena Brooks would walk into that boardroom as the newly promoted senior VP, or she'd be escorted out in disgrace with her reputation shattered across every business publication in Chicago. If you're watching from New York, Miami, LA, or anywhere across the globe, drop your city in the comments and hit that like button. Let's see how far this story travels tonight. The fluorescent lights in the basement server room hummed their usual monotonous tune, casting pale shadows across rows of blinking equipment that most people in the building above would never see or understand. Daniel Hart sat alone at his workstation, the glow from 3 monitors painting his focused features in shades of blue and green. His fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, eyes scanning lines of network traffic data that would look like meaningless gibberish to anyone else. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Wednesday. Outside the reinforced door, the rest of Vanguard Financial's Chicago headquarters lay mostly empty, save for a handful of executives burning midnight oil on the upper floors and the security guards making their rounds. Down here in the server room, the temperature held steady at a crisp 62 degrees, perfect for the equipment, less so for the humans who maintained it. Daniel didn't mind the cold anymore. After 8 months as a cybersecurity contractor for Vanguard, he'd grown accustomed to the isolation, the temperature, and the odd hours. The solitude actually suited him. No small talk, no office politics. Just him, the network, and the endless task of finding vulnerabilities before someone with malicious intent did. He glanced at his phone. The screen showed a text message from his neighbor, Mrs. Chen, sent 2 hours earlier. "Mia's asleep. Take your time. We're watching Encanto again." A small smile crossed Daniel's face. His daughter was obsessed with that movie, had probably seen it 30 times by now. At 5 years old, Mia had her father's quiet intensity, but her late mother's infectious laugh, a laugh Daniel hadn't heard in person for 3 years, not since the car accident that had left him a widowed single father struggling to balance survival with parenthood. He typed back, "Be home by 1 a.m. Thank you for watching her." The server room door required a key card and a 6-digit code to enter, which meant Daniel rarely had visitors. Most people forgot he existed until something broke, or until the quarterly security audit rolled around. That anonymity was fine with him. He'd learned long ago that staying invisible was safer than standing out. Tonight's task was routine: monitoring network traffic patterns, checking firewall logs, ensuring that Vanguard's digital fortress remained impenetrable. The company managed billions in assets, which made them a constant target for hackers, corporate spies, and anyone else looking to exploit a weakness for profit. Daniel's eyes moved across the central monitor, tracking data packets flowing through the network like cars on a digital highway. Everything appeared normal. Standard employee access, automated backups running on schedule, email servers processing the usual volume of corporate communication. Then he saw it. A tiny irregularity in the outbound traffic from the executive floor. It was subtle, so subtle that the automated monitoring systems hadn't flagged it. But Daniel had spent years studying network behavior, and he could spot an anomaly the way a musician could hear an off-key note in an orchestra. He leaned forward, isolating the suspicious traffic stream. Someone was extracting files from the network, not downloading them through normal channels, but using a packet sniffing technique that captured data as it moved through the system, a method typically employed by sophisticated attackers who knew how to avoid triggering standard security alerts. Daniel's pulse quickened. He pulled up the connection details, tracing the data flow back to its source. Executive floor, Office 2847. His fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up access logs and user credentials. The terminal being used belonged to someone with senior-level clearance, someone who had legitimate reasons to access sensitive files. The username made his stomach drop. MCain_SVP. Marcus Cain, Senior Vice President of Strategic Operations. But the files being extracted weren't from Cain's own directories. They were coming from a different executive's private folders, files that should have been completely isolated and protected. Daniel pulled up the target directory. ebrooks_VP/private/strategic_planning Elena Brooks, Vice President of Financial Restructuring, his boss. The woman who had hired him 8 months ago after his previous contracting firm had dissolved. The executive who had looked past his resume's gaps, the year he'd taken off when his wife died, the months he'd spent barely functioning while trying to learn how to be both mother and father to a traumatized toddler, and given him a chance when other companies had politely declined. Daniel's jaw tightened. The extraction was still in progress, pulling document after document from Elena's private files. Personnel reviews, financial analysis reports, strategic proposals for the upcoming board meeting, even personal notes and correspondence. Someone was stealing her entire digital footprint. He checked the clock, 11:52 p.m. Then he checked the extraction rate and calculated how long the attacker had been at this. The answer chilled him. The hack had started 43 minutes ago. Based on the current transfer speed, whoever was behind this would have everything within the next 17 minutes. Before midnight, before the system's automated backup cycle would lock the files and make detection nearly impossible. Daniel grabbed his phone and pulled up Elena's contact information. His thumb hovered over the call button. Then he stopped. What if she wasn't alone? What if calling her would tip off whoever was orchestrating this? The attack was coming from inside the building, using legitimate credentials. This wasn't some random hacker in a foreign country. This was corporate sabotage, calculated and deliberate. He needed to warn her in person. Daniel yanked his access card from the reader, grabbed his laptop, and sprinted for the elevator. The ride from the basement to the executive floor took 38 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Daniel watched the floor numbers climb, his mind racing through scenarios. If Kane was behind this, he wasn't acting alone. You didn't launch this kind of attack without a plan, without leverage, without knowing exactly what you wanted to do with the stolen information. The elevator doors opened onto the 28th floor. The executive suite was a different world from the basement server room. Plush carpeting replaced concrete floors. Original artwork hung on walls painted in sophisticated neutrals. The furniture alone probably cost more than Daniel made in 6 months. Most of the offices were dark, their occupants long gone for the evening. But at the far end of the corridor, light spilled from an open doorway. Office 2847. Elena Brooks. Daniel moved quickly down the hallway, his footsteps muffled by the expensive carpet. As he approached, he could hear the faint sound of classical music, something with violins and piano, elegant and focused. He reached the doorway and stopped. Elena sat at her desk, illuminated by a single lamp, completely absorbed in the presentation displayed on her monitor. She wore a charcoal gray suit with the jacket draped over her chair, her dark hair pulled back in a professional twist that was starting to come loose after a long day. At 36, she had the kind of presence that commanded attention in boardrooms. Confident, articulate, unshakable, or at least she appeared unshakable. Daniel knew from 8 months of observation that Elena Brooks worked harder than anyone else in the building. She arrived before dawn and left after dark. She learned every employee's name. She fought for her team during budget meetings and took responsibility when projects fell short. And tomorrow morning, she was supposed to present a massive financial restructuring proposal to the board of directors. A proposal that could secure her promotion to senior executive vice president and reshape the entire company's operational strategy. If someone leaked her private files before that meeting, her career would be destroyed. Daniel knocked on the door frame. Elena looked up, surprise registering on her features. "Daniel, what are you doing up here? Is there a system problem?" "We need to talk," he said, stepping into the office. "Right now." She must have caught something in his tone because her expression shifted immediately from surprise to alert concern. "What's wrong?" Daniel glanced over his shoulder, checking the empty hallway. Then he moved to her desk and turned her monitor away from the doorway, angling it so only they could see the screen. "Someone's hacking your files," he said quietly. "They've been extracting documents from your private directories for the past 45 minutes. The color drained from Elena's face. "What? How is that possible? I have security protocols. They're using packet sniffing techniques to intercept data as it moves through the network. It's sophisticated, deliberate." He pulled up his laptop, showing her the network traffic logs. "The attack is coming from inside the company, from Marcus Kane's terminal." Elena's eyes widened. "Marcus? Are you absolutely certain?" The credentials are his. Whether he's the one actually executing the attack or someone stole his access, I can't say yet, but the timing isn't coincidental. Daniel met her gaze directly. Your board presentation is tomorrow morning. These files contain everything someone would need to discredit your proposal before you even walk into that room. For a moment, Elena said nothing. Daniel watched her process the information, saw the calculation happening behind her eyes. She wasn't panicking, she was strategizing. Can you stop it? She asked. I can kill the connection, but that might alert whoever's behind this. They'll know we discovered them, and they might have already copied enough to cause damage. Daniel checked his laptop. We have about 14 minutes before they finish. After that, they'll have your entire strategic planning archive. Elena stood up, moving away from her desk. What do you need from me? First, step away from your computer completely. Don't touch anything. If this is being monitored remotely, any unusual activity on your end could trigger a defensive response. Daniel set his laptop down and pulled out a small device from his pocket, a network security key that gave him administrative override access. Second, I need to know exactly what's in those files. How bad is this if they get leaked? Elena's expression tightened. Personnel evaluations, financial forecasts, strategic recommendations that include criticism of current leadership decisions. She paused. And personal correspondence with board members discussing concerns about operational inefficiencies in other departments. Including Marcus Kane's department? Especially Marcus Kane's department. Daniel nodded grimly. That explained the motivation. If Elena's proposal succeeded tomorrow, Kane's entire division would likely be restructured or eliminated. He had every reason to want her discredited before she could present her case. I'm going to need access to your terminal, Daniel said. Full administrative access. Elena pulled a small card from her desk drawer, a secondary authentication token that she kept separate from her main credentials. Will this work? It's perfect. Daniel took the token and inserted it into his laptop, establishing a secure connection to Elena's workstation. Lines of code scrolled across his screen as he penetrated the surface layers of her system, following the digital trail left by the intrusion. The extraction was efficient, methodical. Whoever designed this attack knew exactly what they were looking for and how to avoid detection. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd assumed no one would be watching at midnight on a Wednesday. Daniel's fingers moved rapidly across the keyboard, entering commands that would have looked like random characters to anyone else. He was building a digital trap, a way to not only stop the extraction, but to trace it back to its true source and preserve evidence of the attack. Daniel, Elena said quietly, I have to ask, why are you helping me? He didn't look up from his screen. It's my job. Your contract is for network security, not corporate espionage investigation. You could walk away right now, claim you never saw anything. I could, Daniel agreed, but I won't. Why not? He finally met her eyes. Because 8 months ago, you took a chance on a contractor with a questionable resume and a lot of personal baggage. You didn't ask invasive questions about the gap in my employment history. You didn't make me feel like I needed to apologize for being a single parent. He returned his attention to the laptop. And because someone trying to destroy you with stolen files is wrong, it doesn't matter if I like you or if I agree with your policies. It's still wrong. Elena was quiet for a moment. Then she said, For what it's worth, I've never regretted hiring you. You're the best security contractor we've ever had. I know, Daniel said without arrogance. That's why I'm going to catch whoever's doing this. The code on his screen shifted. He'd successfully isolated the data stream and was now redirecting it through a secure buffer, a digital holding area where he could examine the packets without alerting the attacker that their extraction had been compromised. 8 minutes remaining. Daniel pulled up the actual files being stolen. Personnel reviews that Elena had written in confidence. Financial projections that revealed weaknesses in current operations. Emails where she'd candidly discussed her concerns about leadership decisions with board members who'd asked for her honest assessment. Any one of these documents, leaked to the right people with the right spin, could be devastating. All of them together would be catastrophic. They're going after everything, Daniel said. This isn't just about stopping your presentation. They want to completely destroy your credibility. Elena leaned against her desk, arms crossed. Marcus has been positioning himself for a C-suite promotion for 2 years. If my restructuring proposal passes, it exposes how much money his department has wasted on redundant operations. He loses his leverage with the board. So he eliminates the threat before it materializes. Exactly. Daniel's hand stilled on the keyboard. Elena, I need to tell you something else. She tensed. What? I can stop this extraction. I can preserve evidence of the attack. But the moment I do, whoever's behind this is going to know they've been caught. They might panic and release whatever they've already copied, or they might have a contingency plan. He looked at her seriously. This could get worse before it gets better. Elena didn't hesitate. Do it anyway. I'm not going to let someone blackmail me with stolen files. If Marcus wants to challenge my proposal, he can do it in the boardroom with facts and data, not with sabotage and leaked correspondence. Daniel admired that. The steel beneath the polished exterior. He'd seen too many executives fold under pressure, compromise their principles to protect their positions. Elena was choosing the harder path. All right, he said, but we're doing this my way. I'm going to need you to trust me. I already do. Daniel initiated the countermeasure sequence. On his screen, the data extraction suddenly halted. The connection from Kane's terminal to Elena's files went dark, and in its place, Daniel activated a trace program that would follow the digital breadcrumbs back to the attack's true origin point. 5 seconds passed, then 10. Then Daniel's screen exploded with activity. What's happening? Elena asked, moving closer. They triggered a failsafe, Daniel said tightly. The system just initiated a complete security lockdown on your account. It's a scorched earth protocol. If they can't steal the files, they're going to try to delete everything and make it look like a system failure. Elena's face went pale. Those files are my entire case for tomorrow's presentation. If they're deleted, they won't be. Daniel's voice was calm despite the chaos unfolding on his screen. Because I built the encryption protocols for this network. I know exactly how to counter this. His fingers flew across the keyboard, entering override codes and routing commands through backdoor administrative channels that he'd quietly installed during his first month on the job, just in case of exactly this kind of scenario. The deletion sequence was aggressive, designed to wipe data and overwrite it multiple times to prevent recovery. But Daniel was faster. He isolated Elena's entire directory structure and created a real-time mirror on a secure server that existed outside the main network, a ghost copy that the deletion protocol couldn't touch. Got it, he breathed. Your files are safe. But the screen was still flashing warnings. Elena leaned over his shoulder, close enough that he caught the faint scent of her perfume, something subtle and expensive. What does that mean? She asked, pointing to a red alert banner. Daniel read the message and swore under his breath. The lockdown protocol has frozen both our access credentials. We can't log out, and we can't override the system from here without triggering a complete network shutdown. In English, please? We're trapped in the system until the security lockdown expires at 6 a.m. If we try to force our way out, it'll flag both our accounts and trigger an automatic investigation. He met her eyes. Which means we can't leave this office for the next 6 hours. Elena glanced at the clock on her wall. 12:08 a.m. You're telling me we're stuck here until morning? Unless you want to explain to corporate security why you were forcibly bypassing network protocols in the middle of the night, yes. She let out a long breath, then walked to the windows overlooking Chicago's glittering skyline. For a moment, she just stood there, processing everything that had happened in the past 15 minutes. Daniel saved his work and closed his laptop. I'm sorry. If I'd caught this earlier, don't apologize, Elena cut him off. You just saved my career. The fact that we have to wait a few hours for the system to unlock is a minor inconvenience compared to the alternative. She turned back to face him, and Daniel saw something shift in her expression, a crack in the professional armor. Besides, she said with a tired smile, I was going to be here all night anyway, finishing this presentation. At least now I have company. Daniel found himself almost smiling back. I should warn you, I'm not great at small talk. Good, neither am I. Elena moved to a small cabinet in the corner of her office and pulled out 2 bottles of sparkling water. She tossed one to Daniel. So instead of small talk, why don't you tell me how you learned to do what you just did? That wasn't standard IT security. That was something else entirely. Daniel opened the bottle, considering how much to reveal. He'd spent 8 months being the invisible contractor, the quiet technician who fixed problems and disappeared. Sharing his background meant becoming visible, and visibility led to questions he preferred not to answer. But Elena had trusted him tonight. Maybe he owed her the same courtesy. "I used to work for a private security firm," he said carefully. "The kind that corporations hire when they suspect internal espionage or data breaches. We'd go in undercover, identify the vulnerabilities, and eliminate them before they became public disasters." "Used to work for them," Elena repeated. "What happened?" "My wife died." The words came out flat, emotionless. "Car accident. I had a 5-month-old daughter and no family support nearby. The job required travel, irregular hours, and a level of availability I couldn't maintain anymore." He met Elena's gaze. "So I quit and became a contractor. Stable hours, local work, enough flexibility to be a father." Elena's expression softened. "I didn't know. I'm sorry." "Don't be. You gave me a job when I needed one. That's more than most companies were willing to do for a single parent." She sat down in one of the chairs facing her desk, gesturing for Daniel to take the other. "Is that why you always leave exactly at midnight? I noticed you never stay late, even during critical projects." "My neighbor watches my daughter until I get home. Mrs. Chen is generous, but I don't want to take advantage." Daniel checked his phone, a text from Mrs. Chen. "Saw your message. No rush. We're making pancakes for midnight snack." He smiled slightly, although apparently they're having a party without me. "How old is your daughter?" 5. Her name is Mia." "That's a beautiful name." "It was my wife's choice." Daniel set down his phone. "She died 3 days after Mia was born. Complications from the delivery led to a blood clot. By the time they realized what was wrong, it was too late." The office fell silent except for the faint hum of the ventilation system. Elena's voice, when she spoke, was gentle. "That must have been terrifying, becoming a parent and losing your partner at the same time." "It was." Daniel looked at his hands. "The first year was survival mode. I barely remember most of it. Then slowly things started to make sense again. Mia started talking, started walking, started becoming her own person." He paused. "She's the reason I'm still here, the reason I kept going." Elena nodded slowly. "My father died when I was 7. Heart attack in the middle of a business trip. I remember my mother trying to hold everything together. The house, her job, 2 kids. She never complained, but I could see the weight of it." "Did she manage?" "She did. But she never remarried, never dated, never did anything for herself. It was like she decided her entire identity was surviving widow." Elena's eyes were distant. "I swore I'd never become that. Never let circumstances define me." "Is that why you work so hard?" She smiled faintly. "Partially. Also because I genuinely believe in what we're doing here. Financial restructuring sounds boring to most people, but it's about making companies sustainable, protecting jobs, ensuring that businesses can survive economic storms." She gestured at her presentation materials. "Tomorrow's proposal could save 300 jobs by reallocating resources from redundant departments to growth areas, including eliminating Marcus Kane's division. His department hemorrhages money on outdated methodologies while producing minimal results, but he's protected by political relationships and senior tenure." Elena's voice hardened. "That's why he's trying to destroy me. Not because my data is wrong, but because I'm threatening his comfortable inefficiency." Daniel studied her for a moment. "You really believe this will work? That the board will choose your proposal over protecting someone with Kane's connections?" "They will if the alternative is watching the company bleed resources while our competitors streamline and adapt." Elena met his eyes. "I have the data. I have the analysis. And now, thanks to you, I still have the evidence that Kane tried to sabotage me instead of challenging my ideas legitimately." "About that," Daniel said, "the trace program I installed is still running. By morning, I'll have a complete map of exactly who accessed what, when they did it, and where the data was routed. You'll have proof. Irrefutable proof." Elena leaned back in her chair, something like relief crossing her features. "Then maybe this nightmare actually ends tomorrow." "Or it gets more complicated," Daniel warned. "Cornered people do desperate things." "Let them try." There was steel in her voice now. "I've dealt with desperate people before." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the weight of the night settling around them. Outside the windows, Chicago's lights stretched to the horizon, millions of lives playing out in the buildings below, each with their own crises and victories. Daniel checked his laptop. The trace program was working steadily in the background, documenting every detail of the attack. By 6 a.m., he'd have everything he needed. "I should let you work on your presentation," he said, starting to stand. "Stay," Elena said quickly, then more measured. "I mean, you're stuck here anyway. Might as well be comfortable." Daniel settled back into the chair. Elena pulled up her presentation files, but instead of working in silence, she started talking through her strategy, explaining the data, testing her arguments, refining her language. And Daniel found himself listening, offering observations from a perspective she'd never considered. "You're framing this as cost reduction," he said at one point. "But that makes it sound like you're just cutting for the sake of efficiency. What if you positioned it as strategic reallocation? Same outcome, but it emphasizes growth instead of loss." Elena paused, considering. Then she started reworking an entire section of her presentation. The hours passed. Somewhere around 2 a.m., Elena ordered food from an all-night deli that delivered to the building's lobby. They ate sandwiches at her desk while debating the finer points of financial modeling and cybersecurity architecture. Two subjects that shouldn't have had much overlap, but somehow did when it came to protecting digital assets. At 3:30 a.m., Daniel noticed Elena's eyes starting to close during a particularly dense section of fiscal analysis. "Take a break," he said. "Can't. Still have 3 sections to finalize." "You're not going to be sharp tomorrow if you don't sleep. I'll sleep after the presentation." Daniel recognized that stubbornness. He'd seen it in his own mirror often enough. "Fine, but at least close your eyes for 15 minutes. I'll wake you up." Elena started to protest, then seemed to realize she was too exhausted to argue. She moved to the small couch in her office, kicked off her heels, and was asleep within minutes. Daniel watched her for a moment. This woman who worked herself to exhaustion, who fought for principles even when it cost her, who'd given him a chance when he'd needed it most. Then he returned to his laptop and continued working. The trace program had completed its analysis. Daniel had everything: timestamps, access logs, routing paths, and most damning of all, evidence that Marcus Kane's credentials had been used to activate a sophisticated extraction algorithm that had been planted in the system weeks ago, waiting to be triggered. This wasn't a spontaneous attack. This was premeditated sabotage. Daniel encrypted all the evidence and stored it in 3 separate secure locations. Then he started preparing a presentation of his own, a technical summary that would make the attack undeniable even to board members who barely understood email. At 5:47 a.m., the system lockdown expired. Daniel's credentials reactivated. Elena's account was restored. And in his inbox, there was a message from the automated security system, a routine notification that unusual network activity had been detected and logged for review. Someone else would see that log within hours. The clock was ticking. Daniel stood and walked to the couch where Elena was sleeping. For a moment he hesitated. She looked peaceful, the stress temporarily erased from her features. He almost hated to wake her, but she needed to be ready. "Elena," he said softly. She woke instantly, years of executive training making her alert within seconds. "What time is it?" "Almost 6. The lockdown's over, and I have everything we need." Elena sat up, running her hands through her hair. "Show me." Daniel pulled up the evidence on his laptop. Together they reviewed the timeline, the data, the irrefutable proof of corporate sabotage. "This is enough," Elena said. "More than enough." "What do you want to do with it?" She stood, moving to her desk and pulling out a fresh suit from a closet Daniel hadn't noticed before. Apparently, she kept emergency wardrobe changes in her office for exactly these kinds of situations. "I'm going to take a shower, fix my presentation, and walk into that boardroom at 9 a.m. exactly as planned," she said. "And if Marcus Kane wants to challenge me with leaked files, he's going to get a very unpleasant surprise." Daniel closed his laptop. "I should get home. My daughter will be wondering where I am." "Daniel." He stopped at the door. Elena crossed the office and stood directly in front of him. Up close, he could see the exhaustion in her eyes, but also the determination. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything you did tonight, for believing me, for protecting me. You would have done the same." Maybe, but you didn't have to. She reached out and straightened his collar, a gesture that was somehow both professional and intimate. I won't forget this. Daniel felt something shift between them, some invisible line being crossed. He recognized the danger of it, the complications that could follow. He was a contractor with a daughter waiting at home. She was an executive about to step into a boardroom battle. This wasn't the time for whatever this was becoming. I should go, he said again. But he didn't move. Elena smiled slightly as if she understood exactly what he was thinking. Get out of here, Daniel Hart. Go home to your daughter. I'll see you after the presentation. He nodded and left the office, walking quickly toward the elevator before he could second-guess himself. On the ride down to the basement, Daniel checked his phone. A text from Mia, sent earlier that morning. Daddy, where are you? He typed back, On my way home, sweetheart. Make sure Mrs. Chen gives you breakfast. The server room was exactly as he'd left it hours ago, cold, empty, humming with the sound of machines that never slept. Daniel packed up his equipment, logged out of the systems, and prepared to head home. His contract with Vanguard was almost finished. Another week, maybe 2, and he'd be moving on to the next job, the next company, the next server room. That's how it always worked. But as he walked out of the building into the cold Chicago dawn, watching the city wake up around him, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed tonight. He'd crossed a line, gotten involved, become visible. And somehow, he knew that nothing was going to be the same after Elena Brooks walked into that boardroom. He just hoped they both survived what came next. The apartment was quiet when Daniel finally pushed through the door at 6:23 a.m., the kind of exhausted silence that comes from a night without sleep. Mrs. Chen looked up from the couch where she'd been dozing, a blanket tucked around her small frame. Long night? She asked, her voice knowing. Work emergency, Daniel said, setting his laptop bag down carefully. I'm sorry for keeping you so late. Mrs. Chen waved off his apology with practiced ease. She was 72, a retired nurse who'd lived in the apartment next door for 15 years and had appointed herself Mia's unofficial grandmother after Daniel's wife died. That child is an angel. We had pancakes, watched 2 movies, and she finally fell asleep around 4. She stood, folding the blanket with precise movements. She asked about you, though. Worried you weren't coming back. The words hit Daniel harder than they should have. Mia's abandonment anxiety had gotten better over the years, but it never fully disappeared. How could it? Her mother had left in the most permanent way possible, and no amount of explanation could make a 5-year-old truly understand that death wasn't a choice. I'll talk to her when she wakes up, Daniel said quietly. Mrs. Chen patted his arm as she gathered her things. You're a good father, Daniel. Don't forget that. She paused at the door. Also, you look terrible. Get some sleep. After she left, Daniel moved through the apartment on autopilot. He checked Mia's room, found her curled up under her favorite blanket covered in cartoon butterflies. Her dark hair spread across the pillow like ink spilled on paper. She looked so peaceful, so innocent of the complicated adult world that had kept her father away all night. He pulled the blanket up to her shoulders and kissed her forehead before retreating to his own room. But sleep wouldn't come. Every time Daniel closed his eyes, he saw lines of code, network diagrams, and the look on Elena's face when she'd straightened his collar. That moment had lasted maybe 3 seconds, but it had felt like standing on the edge of something dangerous and exhilarating all at once. He grabbed his phone and opened the encrypted message app he used for work communications. There were no new messages, which meant Elena was either still preparing or already in the boardroom facing whatever came next. Daniel checked the time, 7:15 a.m. The board meeting started at 9. He should sleep. He should let this go. He'd done his job, protected the network, preserved the evidence. What happened in that boardroom wasn't his responsibility, but he couldn't stop thinking about Marcus Kane and whatever desperate move a cornered executive might make when facing exposure. At 7:30, Mia appeared in his doorway, rubbing her eyes. Daddy? Daniel sat up immediately. Hey, sweetheart, come here. She climbed onto the bed and burrowed into his side, still warm from sleep. You were gone all night. I know. I'm sorry. There was a problem at work that only I could fix. Like when the computer breaks? Something like that. Mia was quiet for a moment, then asked in a small voice, Are you going to leave again? Daniel's chest tightened. Not today. Today I'm staying right here with you. Promise? He kissed the top of her head. I promise. They made breakfast together, a Saturday morning ritual even though it was Thursday. Mia insisted on scrambled eggs with cheese, and Daniel let her crack the eggs herself, even though half the shell ended up in the bowl. They sat at their small kitchen table while the Chicago morning light filtered through the windows, and for a little while Daniel could almost forget about corporate sabotage and stolen files and the woman who'd looked at him like he was more than just the invisible contractor in the basement. Almost. At 8:47 a.m., his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Daniel opened it and found a single line of text. Wish me luck. EB. He stared at the message, thumb hovering over the keyboard. What was he supposed to say? Good luck felt inadequate. Don't get destroyed by corporate politics seemed too cynical. You'll be amazing assumed a familiarity they didn't have. Finally, he typed, You don't need luck. You have the truth. 3 dots appeared, indicating she was typing. Then, truth doesn't always win in boardrooms. It will today. Such confidence from someone who builds digital fortresses for a living. Daniel found himself almost smiling. Someone has to protect the people worth protecting. The 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times. Then finally, thank you, Daniel, for everything. He set the phone down and looked across the table at Mia, who was building a fortress of her own out of cereal boxes and juice cartons. Daddy, who are you texting? She asked without looking up. Someone from work. Is it the pretty lady? Daniel froze. What pretty lady? The one in the picture on your computer. I saw her when you were showing me where you work. Mia knocked down her cereal fortress and started rebuilding. She has nice hair. That's my boss, sweetheart, and we don't look at other people's computer screens without asking. Sorry. Mia didn't sound particularly sorry. Is she nice? Daniel considered the question. Yes, she's very nice. Does she like you? It's not like that. Mrs. Chen says when grown-ups say, it's not like that, it usually means it is like that. Daniel made a mental note to have a conversation with Mrs. Chen about what she discussed with his daughter. Mrs. Chen talks too much. Mia giggled, and the sound made Daniel's chest ache with love so fierce it was almost painful. This was his world, this small apartment, this bright-eyed child, this careful routine they'd built together from the wreckage of loss. Getting involved with Elena Brooks, even hypothetically, meant risking that carefully constructed stability. At 9:02 a.m., Daniel's phone rang. Not a text this time, but an actual call from another unknown number. He answered cautiously. Hello? Mr. Hart? The voice was male, professional, unfamiliar. This is James Chen from Vanguard Financial's legal department. We need you to come to the office immediately. Daniel's stomach dropped. What's this about? I can't discuss it over the phone, but I've been authorized to tell you that your presence is required for a board-level security review. A pause. This is not optional, Mr. Hart. The line went dead. Daniel sat frozen, his mind racing through possibilities. A board-level security review could mean anything from a routine audit to a full investigation. But the timing, right when Elena was presenting, couldn't be coincidental. Someone knew what he'd done last night, and they wanted him in that building. Mia was watching him with concern. Daddy? What's wrong? Daniel forced his expression into something calmer. I have to go back to work for a little bit. But you promised. I know, sweetheart, I'm sorry, but this is important. He pulled out his phone and texted Mrs. Chen, then looked at Mia seriously. Mrs. Chen is going to come stay with you. I'll be back as soon as I can. Mia's eyes filled with tears. You always say that. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Mia, you said today you'd stay. You promised. Her voice rose to a wail. I hate your work. I hate that place. Daniel knelt down beside her chair, taking her small hands in his. I know you're scared. I know you don't understand why I have to leave sometimes, but there's someone who needs my help right now, and I'm the only one who can help them. What about me? I need you too. And you're the most important person in my world. That's why I work, sweetheart. To take care of you. To make sure we're safe. He wiped away her tears. But sometimes taking care of you means doing hard things, even when I don't want to. Mia sniffled, her small face a portrait of betrayal. Will you really come back? I will always come back to you. Always. Mrs. Chen arrived 15 minutes later, took one look at Mia's tear-streaked face, and gave Daniel a look that clearly said they'd be having words later. But she simply gathered Mia into a hug and started talking about baking cookies, and slowly Mia's sobs quieted to hiccups. Daniel grabbed his laptop and headed for the door, pausing to look back at his daughter one more time. I love you, Mia. She didn't answer. The drive to Vanguard Financial took 23 minutes through morning traffic. Daniel used the time to prepare for whatever was waiting. If they were calling him in for questioning, someone had already reviewed the security logs and seen his activity from last night. The question was whether they viewed him as part of the problem or part of the solution. He parked in the contractor lot and made his way to the main entrance, where a security guard he didn't recognize was waiting. Mr. Hart, please follow me. They didn't go to the server room or the contractor offices. Instead, the guard led Daniel to the executive floor, then down a corridor he'd never accessed before, to a conference room with frosted glass walls and a heavy wooden door. The guard opened the door and gestured for Daniel to enter. Inside, 4 people sat around a massive table. Daniel recognized 2 of them, James Chen, the lawyer who'd called him, and Patricia Morrison, Vanguard's chief information officer. The other 2 were strangers, both wearing expensive suits and expressions of professional neutrality. Elena was not in the room. Mr. Hart, please sit down, Patricia said, gesturing to an empty chair. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense. Daniel had met with her twice during his contract onboarding and had found her intimidating both times. He sat, setting his laptop on the table. What's this about? James Chen opened a folder. At approximately 11:52 p.m. last night, our automated security systems detected unusual network activity originating from your credentials. This activity continued until 5:47 a.m. this morning. He looked up. Can you explain what you were doing during that time? Daniel kept his voice steady. I was investigating a security breach. Without authorization? The breach was active and time-sensitive. Waiting for authorization would have resulted in significant data loss. Patricia leaned forward. What kind of breach? A sophisticated packet-sniffing attack targeting Vice President Brooks' private files. The extraction was being conducted using Senior Vice President Kane's credentials. The room went very quiet. One of the strangers spoke for the first time, a woman with silver hair and a voice like ice. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Hart. It's not an accusation. It's documented fact. Daniel opened his laptop and pulled up the evidence files. I have complete logs of the attack, including timestamps, routing paths, and proof that the extraction algorithm was planted weeks ago specifically to target Ms. Brooks before this morning's board presentation. He turned the laptop around so they could see the screen. James Chen studied the data for a long moment. Then he looked at Patricia. He's right. This is packet sniffing, advanced level. Can we verify this independently? The silver-haired woman asked. I encrypted the evidence files in 3 separate secure locations, Daniel said. I can provide access to all of them. Patricia's expression was unreadable. Why didn't you report this through official channels? Because the attack was coming from inside the company using executive credentials. I didn't know who to trust. Daniel met her gaze directly. I made the choice to protect the data first and deal with the procedural questions later. That was a violation of protocol. Yes. You could be fired for that. I know. The silver-haired woman exchanged glances with her companion, some silent communication passing between them. Then she stood and extended her hand to Daniel. I'm Catherine Reynolds, chair of Vanguard's board of directors. This is Robert Huang, our outside legal counsel. She shook Daniel's hand with a grip like iron. We need you to present this evidence to the full board, right now. Daniel's pulse quickened. The board meeting is happening now, isn't it? It is. And Marcus Kane just presented what he claims are leaked files proving Elena Brooks is unfit for promotion. Catherine's smile was sharp as a knife. I think it's time we heard the rest of the story. They moved as a group down the hallway, Daniel surrounded by lawyers and executives like a prisoner being escorted to trial, or a key witness being brought to testify. The boardroom doors were impressive, solid oak with brass handles. Catherine pushed them open without hesitation. The room beyond was everything Daniel expected from corporate power centers. Massive table, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. 12 board members sat around the table, and at the far end, Elena stood beside a presentation screen, her expression controlled but tense. Across from her, Marcus Kane sat with the satisfied smile of someone who thought they'd already won. Every head turned when Catherine entered with Daniel behind her. "My apologies for the interruption," Catherine said smoothly. "But we have new information relevant to this morning's discussion." She gestured to Daniel. "This is Daniel Hart, our cybersecurity contractor. He has evidence the board needs to see." Marcus Kane's smile faltered. "With all due respect, Madam Chair, we're in the middle of critical deliberations. Whatever minor technical issue Mr. Hart has discovered can surely wait." "It's not a minor technical issue," Catherine cut him off. "It's evidence of corporate sabotage, and you're going to sit there and listen to every word." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Daniel moved to the presentation console, acutely aware of every eye on him. He'd infiltrated networks, dismantled security threats, and gone head-to-head with sophisticated hackers. But standing in front of 12 board members while wearing jeans and a wrinkled shirt because he'd been up all night was a different kind of intimidation. He caught Elena's eye for just a moment. She looked terrified and hopeful in equal measure. Daniel connected his laptop to the system and pulled up his evidence files. "Last night at 11:52 p.m., he began, his voice steady despite his racing heart, "I detected an active extraction attack targeting Vice President Brooks' private network directories. The attack used packet-sniffing techniques to intercept data as it moved through our system, bypassing standard security protocols." He pulled up the first set of logs. "The attack originated from credentials belonging to Senior Vice President Marcus Kane." Marcus shot to his feet. "That's impossible. My credentials are secure. If someone used them, it was unauthorized access." "Please sit down, Marcus," Catherine said coldly. Marcus sat, but his face had gone red with barely controlled rage. Daniel continued, displaying the technical evidence in clear, simple terms. He showed the timeline of the attack, the specific files targeted, and the deletion protocol that had been triggered when he'd interrupted the extraction. "The algorithm used in this attack was sophisticated and deliberate," Daniel explained. "It was planted in our system approximately 3 weeks ago, designed to activate on command and extract specific file types from Ms. Brooks's directories." One of the board members, an older man with white hair, raised his hand. "Are you saying this was premeditated?" "Yes, this wasn't an opportunistic hack. This was a planned operation designed to steal sensitive files immediately before this morning's presentation." Daniel pulled up another screen. "And here's the most critical piece of evidence." He displayed the routing logs showing where the extracted data had been sent. The files weren't just stolen. They were routed to an external device, a flash drive registered to this building's guest network. Daniel looked directly at Marcus Kane, a flash drive that, according to the access logs, was connected to a computer in this very room approximately 45 minutes ago. Every eye turned to Marcus. His face had gone from red to pale. "This is a setup. Hart is obviously working with Brooks to frame me." "Show us the flash drive, Marcus," Catherine said quietly. "I don't have any flash drive." "Then you won't mind if we search your belongings." The silence stretched like a wire pulled taut. Finally, Marcus reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small black flash drive. "Fine. Here. But whatever's on this drive, I received it anonymously. I was told it contained evidence of Elena's misconduct." "Plug it in," Catherine ordered. Marcus hesitated. Robert Huang, the outside counsel, stood up. "Mr. Kane, if you refuse to cooperate with this investigation, I will have security remove you from this room and we will obtain a court order to examine that device. Your choice." Marcus's hands shook as he inserted the flash drive into the boardroom's computer system. The files appeared on the main screen, dozens of documents, all from Elena's private directories. But when Marcus tried to open the first file, it displayed only corrupted data. "What the hell?" Marcus clicked through file after file. All corrupted, all unreadable. Daniel allowed himself a small smile. "The files are encrypted with a protocol I designed specifically for Ms. Brooks's most sensitive documents. The extraction algorithm copied the files, but it couldn't decrypt them without the proper authentication keys. He pulled up another screen. But the real evidence isn't what's in those files. It's the metadata showing exactly when they were copied, from where, and by whom. The technical details scrolled across the screen, damning and irrefutable. Marcus Kane sat frozen, watching his entire career collapse in real time. Catherine Reynolds' voice was steel. "Marcus, you have approximately 10 seconds to explain yourself before I call security." "It was her or me," Marcus exploded, his composure finally shattering. "She was going to dismantle my entire department, make me look incompetent in front of the board. I built that division from nothing, and she was going to destroy it with her efficiency analysis and strategic restructuring." He pointed at Elena. "She's been gunning for my position since the day she was hired." Elena's voice, when she spoke, was perfectly calm. "I was gunning for better results, Marcus, not your position. The fact that you can't distinguish between the two is exactly why your department is failing." "You self-righteous—" "That's enough," Catherine cut him off. "Security, please escort Mr. Kane from the building. His employment is terminated effective immediately." She looked at Robert Huang. "I want a full investigation into this incident and a report on my desk by end of business today." Two security guards appeared as if summoned by magic. They flanked Marcus Kane, who seemed to deflate as the reality of his situation set in. As they led him toward the door, he looked back at Elena one last time. "This isn't over." "Yes, Marcus," Elena said quietly. "It is." The doors closed behind him with a definitive click. Catherine turned to the remaining board members. "I believe we were about to hear Ms. Brooks' proposal before we were interrupted by Mr. Kane's theatrics. Shall we continue?" The next hour was surreal. Daniel sat in a chair along the wall while Elena presented her financial restructuring plan with absolute precision. She walked the board through data, projections, and strategic recommendations that made compelling sense even to Daniel's non-financial mind. And when the questions came, Elena answered each one with confidence and clarity. Finally, Catherine called for a vote. The decision was unanimous. "Congratulations, Ms. Brooks," Catherine said with a rare smile. "The board approves your restructuring proposal and confirms your promotion to Senior Executive Vice President, effective immediately." The room erupted in applause. Board members stood to shake Elena's hand, offering congratulations and already discussing implementation timelines. Daniel quietly gathered his laptop and started moving toward the door. "Mr. Hart," Catherine's voice stopped him. "A moment, please." He turned back. Catherine gestured for him to approach. "What you did last night was reckless, procedurally questionable, and exactly the kind of initiative we need more of in this company." She pulled a business card from her pocket. "Your contract expires next week, correct?" "Yes, ma'am." "I'm offering you a permanent position. Head of Cybersecurity, full benefits, salary commensurate with your rather exceptional skills." She held out the card. "Think about it." Daniel took the card, too surprised to formulate a proper response. "We need people who understand that sometimes protecting the company means breaking a few rules," Catherine continued. "People who can think 3 steps ahead of the threats." She glanced at Elena, who was still surrounded by congratulatory board members. "And people who know which battles are worth fighting." "I have a daughter," Daniel said. "I need predictable hours." "We'll make it work. Take the weekend, discuss it with your family, and let me know Monday." Catherine extended her hand. "Either way, thank you for what you did." Daniel shook her hand and made his escape before anyone else could corner him. The elevator ride down felt like descending from one world into another. In the boardroom, Elena had just secured the promotion of a lifetime. In Daniel's world, he had a 5-year-old daughter who'd cried when he broke his promise to stay home. His phone buzzed, a text from Elena. "Where did you go?" He typed back. "Home, congratulations on the promotion." "I need to see you." "Not today. You have a celebration to attend to." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, "Tonight. After all this is over, please." Daniel stared at the message for a long moment. He could say no. Should say no. Going to see Elena tonight meant acknowledging that something had shifted between them, that their relationship had evolved beyond contractor and executive into something more complicated and dangerous. But he'd never been particularly good at doing what he should do. "I'll think about it," he typed. The response came immediately. That's not a no. It's not a yes either. I'll take what I can get. Thank you, Daniel, for everything. He pocketed his phone and walked out of the building into the midday sun. Chicago spread out around him, indifferent to boardroom dramas and corporate sabotage. The city had seen 1,000 Elena Brooks and 1,000 Marcus Caines, and it would see 1,000 more. Daniel was just one man trying to navigate the space between protecting others and protecting himself. When he got home, Mrs. Chen met him at the door with crossed arms and a disapproving expression. That child cried for 20 minutes after you left. I know, I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix broken promises, Daniel. I know that too. He moved past her into the apartment. Where is she? Her room, building something with those blocks you got her. Daniel found Mia exactly where Mrs. Chen said, surrounded by colorful plastic blocks that she was assembling into some kind of elaborate structure. She didn't look up when he entered. Hey, sweetheart. Silence. Daniel sat down on the floor beside her. I'm sorry I broke my promise. You always say sorry. I know, and I know that doesn't make it better. He picked up one of the blocks, turning it over in his hands. But I want you to understand something. The reason I left today was because someone needed help. Someone who gave me a job when I really needed one, who made it possible for me to take care of you. Mia finally looked at him. The pretty lady? Yes, the pretty lady. She was in trouble, and I was the only person who could help her. Did you help her? I did. Mia considered this. Is she okay now? She's better than okay. She won. Like in the movies? Daniel smiled. Yeah, like in the movies. Mia set down the block she was holding and climbed into Daniel's lap, wrapping her small arms around his neck. I was scared you wouldn't come back. The words broke something in Daniel's chest. He held her tight, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and the cookies she'd clearly been eating with Mrs. Chen. I will always come back to you, he said quietly. Always. No matter what. You're my whole world, Mia. They sat like that for a long time, Daniel holding his daughter while she clung to him like he was the only solid thing in an unstable world. And maybe he was. Later that evening, after Mia had eaten dinner and was absorbed in a movie, Daniel's phone rang again. Elena's name appeared on the screen. He answered, Hello. I have a dinner reservation at 8, Elena said without preamble. It's at a quiet place in Lincoln Park. Nothing fancy. I'm asking if you'd like to join me. Elena, before you say no, let me be clear about what this is. Her voice was steady, but somehow vulnerable. This isn't me celebrating my promotion. This isn't me trying to complicate your life or mine. This is just me wanting to have dinner with someone who saw me at my worst and helped me anyway. Daniel looked through the doorway at Mia, who was singing along with the movie, completely content. I have a daughter, he said. I know. I can't do complicated right now. I'm not asking for complicated. I'm asking for dinner. It's never just dinner, Elena. She was quiet for a moment. You're probably right, but I'm asking anyway. Daniel closed his eyes, weighing impossible choices. His life was carefully balanced, deliberately simple. Adding Elena Brooks to that equation meant risk, uncertainty, the possibility of disruption, but it also meant possibility. I'll be there, he heard himself say. 8 o'clock. Thank you. Relief colored her voice. And Daniel, you can bring Mia if you'd rather not leave her. That simple offer, the acknowledgement of his reality rather than asking him to hide it, made the decision feel less impossible. Maybe next time, Daniel said. Tonight, it's just us. After they hung up, Daniel sat in the quiet apartment and thought about all the ways this could go wrong. He thought about Mia's abandonment anxiety and his own carefully constructed walls. He thought about the difference between Elena's world and his, between executive promotions and server rooms. But he also thought about the way she'd looked at him in her office at 6 in the morning, exhausted and grateful, and somehow seeing him in a way no one else had in 3 years. Mrs. Chen agreed to watch Mia for the evening with a knowing look that Daniel chose to ignore. At 7:45, he stood in front of his closet, trying to decide what someone wore to dinner that was definitely not a date, but felt like the beginning of something anyway. In the end, he chose simple: dark jeans, a button-down shirt, a jacket that wasn't wrinkled. Mia appeared in his doorway. You look handsome, Daddy. Thank you, sweetheart. Are you going to see the pretty lady? Her name is Elena, and yes. Mia studied him with the unsettling wisdom of children who see too much. Do you like her? Daniel knelt down to her level. I don't know yet. That's what dinner is for. To figure out if we like each other. I think you already know, Mia said seriously. You get the same look Mommy used to get when she talked about you. The observation struck Daniel speechless. Mia kissed his cheek. It's okay to like people, Daddy. Mommy would want you to be happy. Then she skipped back to the living room, leaving Daniel kneeling on the floor with tears in his eyes and his heart breaking open in ways he thought he'd sealed shut forever. At 8 o'clock exactly, Daniel walked into the restaurant in Lincoln Park and found Elena waiting at a corner table, her hair down and wearing a simple dress that made her look less like an executive and more like someone he might have known in another life. She smiled when she saw him, and for the first time in 3 years, Daniel let himself smile back without holding anything in reserve. Whatever came next, whatever complicated mess they were about to create, he'd deal with it. But tonight, for just a few hours, he was going to sit across from someone who saw him and let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, he deserved to be seen. The restaurant was everything Elena had promised. Quiet, intimate, the kind of place where conversations happened in low tones, and the lighting was soft enough to make everyone look like they belonged in an old photograph. Daniel felt out of place the moment he stepped inside, acutely aware of the difference between his world and this one. But then Elena stood up from the corner table, and that smile of hers erased every doubt about whether he should have come. You made it, she said as he approached. I said I would. You also said you'd think about it, which in my experience usually means no. She gestured to the chair across from her. I'm glad I was wrong. Daniel sat down, suddenly hyper-aware of how close they were, how the candlelight caught the angles of her face, how different she looked without the armor of executive authority wrapped around her. This was Elena without the boardroom, without the crisis, without the pressure of proving herself to people who already doubted her. This was just Elena. How was the rest of your day? Daniel asked, defaulting to safe territory. Elena laughed, a sound that held equal parts exhaustion and triumph. Surreal. I spent 3 hours in meetings about implementation timelines, another 2 fielding congratulations calls from people who probably wanted Marcus's job, and at least 45 minutes listening to HR explain the legal implications of what happened this morning. She picked up her wine glass, swirling the dark liquid absently. Apparently, corporate sabotage requires a shocking amount of paperwork. And Marcus? Escorted off the premises, files seized, employment terminated for cause. Robert Huang thinks he'll try to sue for wrongful termination, but the evidence you compiled is ironclad. Elena's expression sobered. He destroyed his entire career because he couldn't accept that maybe his methods were outdated. Some people would rather burn everything down than admit they were wrong. Is that from experience? Daniel thought about the security firm he'd left, the career he'd abandoned, the life he'd planned that had evaporated the night his wife died. Everyone has something they had to walk away from. The question is whether you learn from it or let it consume you. Elena studied him across the table, her gaze direct and searching. You don't talk much about yourself, do you? Occupational habit. In my line of work, being invisible is usually an asset. Except you're not invisible. Not to me. She set down her wine glass. I've been watching you for 8 months, Daniel. The way you work, the way you solve problems, the way you disappear at midnight every single night, like some kind of cybersecurity Cinderella. A slight smile. I've been curious about you for a while now. The admission caught Daniel off guard. I'm not that interesting. That's where you're wrong. Most people in your position would have used last night as leverage, asked for a promotion, demanded a raise, at the very least taken credit publicly for saving my career. But you slipped out of that boardroom the moment the crisis was over, like you'd rather disappear than be thanked. I don't do it for recognition. I know. That's what makes it interesting. Elena leaned forward slightly. So tell me, Daniel Hart, who are you when you're not being the invisible contractor in the basement? The waiter appeared before Daniel had to answer, giving him time to collect his thoughts while they ordered. When the waiter left, Daniel found himself at a crossroads. He could deflect, keep the conversation surface level and safe, maintain the professional distance that had protected him for 3 years. or he could let her in. "I'm a father first," he said finally. "Everything else is secondary to that. The job, the career, the identity I had before Mia was born, all of it got reorganized around the single priority of making sure she grows up feeling loved and secure." That must be exhausting. Some days more than others. Today was particularly rough. Daniel ran his hand through his hair. "She cried when I left this morning. Told me she hated my work, hated that I keep leaving." Elena's expression softened with understanding. "And yet you came tonight anyway." "Mrs. Chen, my neighbor, told me it's okay to like people, that my wife would want me to be happy." The words felt strange in his mouth, like a language he'd forgotten how to speak. "I'm not sure I believe that yet, but I'm trying." "How long has it been since your wife passed?" 3 years, 4 months, 17 days. Daniel saw Elena's eyes widen at the precision. "I don't count anymore, not consciously. But the number is always there, like background noise I can't quite silence." "What was her name?" "Sarah." Saying it aloud still hurt, a dull ache that never fully healed. "We met in college, got married too young, had all these plans for the future. She wanted to be a photographer, travel the world, capture moments that mattered." He paused. "Then she got pregnant, and we decided to wait. Do the responsible thing first, build stability, and then chase the dreams. But the dreams never happened. She died 3 days after Mia was born, pulmonary embolism. The doctors said it was rare, unpredictable, nothing anyone could have prevented." Daniel's voice remained steady through years of practice. "One moment she was holding our daughter, talking about all the places we'd take her someday. The next, she was gone." The silence that followed was heavy with shared grief. Elena didn't offer empty platitudes or try to fill the space with meaningless comfort. She just sat with the weight of his loss, and somehow that was more valuable than anything she could have said. "I lost my father when I was 7, Elena said quietly. "Heart attack on a business trip. My mother never recovered, not really. She spent the rest of her life in this state of suspended mourning, like she was just waiting to join him." She met Daniel's eyes. "I swore I'd never be like that. Never let loss define me so completely that I forgot how to live." "Is that why you work so hard? To prove you're still alive?" "Maybe. Or maybe I just don't know how to stop moving because if I do, I'll have to confront all the things I've been running from." A rueful smile. "We're quite a pair, aren't we? The workaholic executive and the widowed contractor, both using our jobs to avoid dealing with our grief." Daniel found himself almost smiling. "When you put it that way, this dinner sounds like a terrible idea." "Probably the worst," Elena raised her glass, "to terrible ideas and the courage to pursue them anyway." Daniel lifted his water glass. He'd declined wine, needing to stay clear-headed, and touched it to hers. The crystal rang with a clear, pure note that seemed to hang in the air between them. Their food arrived, and the conversation shifted to safer territory. Elena talked about her plans for the restructuring, the departments she hoped to salvage, the people she wanted to promote. Daniel found himself offering insights from his perspective on the technical side, pointing out inefficiencies she hadn't considered, and security vulnerabilities that her new organizational structure might expose. "You should be in those planning meetings," Elena said at one point. "Your perspective is valuable." "Catherine Reynolds offered me a permanent position this morning, head of cybersecurity." Elena's face lit up. "Daniel, that's incredible. Did you accept?" "I told her I'd think about it." He pushed food around his plate. "Permanent positions come with expectations. Longer hours, more responsibility, less flexibility. I'm not sure I can give Mia what she needs if I'm committing to that kind of role." "What if you had support? People who understood your situation and worked with you to make it feasible?" "You mean you." "I mean a team that recognizes talent and doesn't punish people for having lives outside the office." Elena set down her fork. "But yes, I mean me too. If you took this position, we'd be working together regularly. I'd make sure you had the flexibility you needed." Daniel met her gaze directly. "And is that what this dinner is about? Convincing me to take the job?" "No." Elena didn't hesitate. "This dinner is about me wanting to spend time with someone who sees me as more than just a position title. Someone who helped me when he didn't have to, who kept me grounded when I was terrified, who made me feel like maybe I wasn't fighting alone. She paused. The job offer is separate. What I'm asking for right now has nothing to do with Vanguard Financial. Then what are you asking for? I don't know yet. A second dinner, maybe. A chance to figure out if this thing between us is real or just crisis-induced adrenaline. Elena's voice softened. I know your life is complicated. I know you have priorities that come before anything else. But I'm asking if there's space, even a small space, for something that's just for you. Daniel thought about Mia's words earlier, about the look his wife used to get, about the possibility of being happy again. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, being asked to trust that the fall wouldn't destroy him. I can't make promises, he said finally. I can't guarantee that I won't have to cancel plans when Mia needs me. I can't be the kind of person who puts a relationship first because she comes first. Always. I'm not asking you to change that. I'm asking if you're willing to see where this goes with all those conditions in place. And you'd be okay with that? Coming second to a 5-year-old? Elena smiled, and there was genuine warmth in it. Daniel, the fact that your daughter comes first is one of the things I admire most about you. I'd be worried if it were any other way. Something in Daniel's chest loosened, a tension he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. Okay. Okay? Okay, let's see where this goes, but slowly. One dinner at a time. One dinner at a time, Elena agreed. I can work with that. They finished their meal talking about smaller things, books they'd read, places they'd traveled before life got complicated, childhood memories that shaped who they'd become. Daniel found himself laughing at Elena's story about accidentally flooding her college dorm room while trying to do laundry, and Elena seemed genuinely fascinated by his explanation of how he'd taught himself advanced coding at age 14 using library books and a computer his uncle had thrown away. When the check came, they argued briefly over who should pay before agreeing to split it, a compromise that felt symbolic of whatever balance they were trying to strike. Outside the restaurant, Chicago's night air was crisp and cool, carrying the scent of the lake and car exhaust, and a million other urban elements that combined into something uniquely this city. Elena pulled her coat tighter against the wind. Can I walk you to your car? Daniel asked. I took a cab, didn't want to deal with parking. Then let me drive you home. Elena hesitated, and Daniel recognized the calculation happening behind her eyes, the same one he'd made earlier about whether moving forward meant inviting complication they weren't ready for. Just a ride, he clarified. Not an invitation for anything else. Just a ride, Elena agreed. His car was parked 3 blocks away, and they walked in comfortable silence, their shoulders occasionally brushing in the crowded sidewalk traffic. When they reached his vehicle, a practical sedan that had seen better years, Elena laughed. What? Daniel asked, unlocking the doors. I don't know what I expected, but somehow this feels very you. Reliable, functional, probably has an exceptional safety rating. It has a car seat in the back, Daniel said, opening the passenger door for her. That's really all that matters. Elena glanced in the back seat, where Mia's booster seat sat surrounded by scattered coloring books and a stuffed elephant. Her expression went soft. She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her. She's the only thing that kept me functional after Sarah died. The drive to Elena's apartment in the Gold Coast took 20 minutes through late evening traffic. She directed him through turns while they listened to a jazz station playing something smooth and melancholy. At a red light, Daniel felt Elena looking at him. What? I'm trying to reconcile the person who builds digital fortresses for a living with the man who has a stuffed elephant named... She squinted at the tag. Mr. Peanuts in his back seat. Mia named him. She was 3 and going through an elephant phase. The light changed, and Daniel accelerated smoothly. And for the record, building digital fortresses and being a father aren't mutually exclusive. If anything, one informs the other. Protecting systems requires the same instincts as protecting a child. Anticipating threats, building layers of defense, knowing when to be vigilant and when to let things run on their own. That's actually a beautiful way to think about it. It's a necessary way to think about it, otherwise the guilt would be overwhelming. Elena's building was exactly what Daniel expected. Modern, expensive, with a doorman who nodded politely as they pulled up to the entrance. He put the car in park but left the engine running. Thank you for dinner, Elena said, and for the conversation. I haven't talked like this with anyone in longer than I can remember. Neither have I. She reached for the door handle, then stopped. Daniel, can I ask you something? Are you scared of this, whatever this is becoming? He didn't have to think about his answer. Terrified. Good, me too. Elena smiled, and it was the most genuine expression he'd seen from her all night. I'd be worried if one of us was approaching this without fear. Fear means it matters. Is that your executive wisdom talking? No, that's my therapist talking. I've been in counseling for 2 years trying to unpack my tendency to use work as an emotional shield. She laughed at his expression. Surprised? A little. You seem so put together. That's the shield working. Underneath, I'm just as messy as everyone else. Elena opened the door, letting in the cool night air. Same time next week? If you're still interested in terrible ideas? I'll check my calendar, but probably yes. Probably yes, I'll take it. She stepped out of the car, then leaned back in. Drive safe. Text me when you get home so I know you made it. You sound like Mrs. Chen. Mrs. Chen sounds like a wise woman. Elena closed the door and walked toward the building's entrance. Halfway there, she turned and waved. Daniel waved back, then waited until she was safely inside before pulling away from the curb. The drive home should have given him time to process everything that had happened. The dinner, the conversation, the agreement to see where this complicated thing might lead. But instead, Daniel's mind kept returning to one simple truth. For 3 years, he'd been surviving. Tonight, for the first time since Sarah died, he'd felt like he might actually be living again. The apartment was quiet when he returned. Mrs. Chen had left a note on the kitchen counter. Mia asleep by 9:30. We made cookies. They're terrible. Don't eat them. AC. Daniel smiled and peeked into Mia's room. She was sprawled across her bed, one arm thrown over Mr. Peanut's, her face peaceful in sleep. He adjusted her blanket and kissed her forehead, breathing in the scent of sugar cookies and children's shampoo. His phone buzzed with a text from Elena. Did you make it home? Safe and sound. Mia's asleep. Apparently they made terrible cookies. Does she bake as well as she colors? About the same. Lots of enthusiasm, questionable execution. I'd like to meet her someday, if that's something you'd be comfortable with. Daniel stared at the message, feeling the weight of what Elena was really asking. Meeting Mia meant acknowledging this was more than just dinners and careful conversations. It meant introducing his daughter to the possibility of someone new in their lives, someone who might become important and might leave, adding another layer to Mia's already complicated relationship with loss. But it also meant believing that maybe, possibly, this thing with Elena could be real enough to matter. Someday, he typed back, when we're both ready. I can work with someday. Daniel set his phone down and moved to the window, looking out over the Chicago night. Somewhere out there, Elena was probably doing the same thing, standing in her expensive apartment and wondering if she'd made the right choice pursuing something this complicated. He hoped she was, because the alternative, hoping alone, felt too familiar, too much like the last 3 years of careful isolation he'd built around himself and Mia. His phone buzzed again. Not Elena this time, but an email notification. Daniel opened it and found a formal message from Catherine Reynolds. Mr. Hart, further to our conversation this morning, please find attached the official employment contract for the position of Head of Cybersecurity. The role includes comprehensive benefits, flexible scheduling provisions, and a salary structure that reflects your exceptional value to this organization. We hope you'll seriously consider joining Vanguard Financial permanently. Regards, Catherine Reynolds. The attached contract was thorough, professional, and offered more money than Daniel had made in the last 2 years combined. The benefits package alone would transform Mia's life. Better health care, educational funds, security they'd never had before. But it also meant committing to Vanguard, to Chicago, to a life that was no longer defined by contracts that ended and allowed him to disappear when things got complicated. It meant staying. Daniel saved the email and set his phone on the charger. The decision didn't need to be made tonight. He had until Monday, and between now and then, he'd talk to Mrs. Chen, maybe even find a way to explain the situation to Mia in terms a 5-year-old could understand. But part of him already knew what his answer would be. The next few days passed in a strange suspension of normalcy. Daniel went through his usual routines: morning breakfast with Mia, reviewing security protocols in the server room, evening stories before bed. But underneath the familiar patterns, everything felt different. Elena texted him periodically, never demanding or intrusive, just small check-ins that made him smile. A photo of her lunch with the caption, "Trying to remember what food tastes like when not eating it at my desk." A screenshot of an absurd email from a board member asking if she could make the computers go faster. Simple moments of connection that somehow felt more intimate than the dinner they'd shared. On Friday evening, Daniel took Mia to the park near their apartment. She ran toward the swings with the fearless enthusiasm of childhood, while Daniel pushed her higher and higher, listening to her squeals of delight. "Daddy, look! I'm flying!" "I see you, sweetheart. You're doing great." After the swings, they sat on a bench eating ice cream despite the cool October air. Mia had chocolate smeared across her face and didn't care at all. "Daddy, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you happy?" The question caught Daniel completely off guard. "What makes you ask that?" Mia shrugged, swinging her legs back and forth. "You've been smiling more, like when you're looking at your phone. Mrs. Chen says you look like someone who found something they lost." Daniel pulled Mia closer, wrapping his arm around her small shoulders. "I think maybe I am becoming happier. Is that okay with you?" "It makes me happy when you're happy." She looked up at him with those serious dark eyes that saw too much. "Is it because of the pretty lady, Elena?" "Partly, but mostly it's because I have you and I realize that it's okay to want more than just surviving. That being your dad doesn't mean I can't also be someone who has friends, and maybe, eventually, other people who matter." "Like a girlfriend?" "Maybe, someday. Would that bother you?" Mia considered this carefully, taking another bite of her ice cream cone. "I don't remember Mommy very much, just sometimes in dreams. Mrs. Chen showed me pictures and you tell me stories, but it's like remembering someone else's memories instead of mine." Daniel's heart clenched. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. It's not your fault. I was too little." Mia leaned against him. "But I think Mommy would want you to have someone who makes you smile at your phone. Because you deserve to be happy, Daddy. You take care of everyone else. Someone should take care of you too." The wisdom in those words, coming from a 5-year-old child, nearly broke Daniel. He held Mia tighter, fighting tears. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart. You just don't always notice because you're busy protecting computers." They finished their ice cream in comfortable silence, watching other families play in the park. Daniel thought about Catherine's job offer, about Elena waiting for next week's dinner, about all the ways his carefully controlled life was threatening to expand into something bigger and scarier and potentially wonderful. That night, after Mia was asleep, Daniel opened his laptop and started drafting an email to Catherine Reynolds. He wrote 3 different versions, deleted them all, and started over. Finally, he settled on something simple and direct. "Ms. Reynolds, thank you for the generous offer. After careful consideration, I'm pleased to accept the position of Head of Cybersecurity at Vanguard Financial. I look forward to discussing the flexible scheduling provisions and beginning this new chapter. My only condition is that I need to maintain predictable hours that allow me to be present for my daughter. If that's acceptable, I'm ready to start whenever you need me. Regards, Daniel Hart." He read it over 3 times, checking for typos and second-guessing every word. Then, before he could talk himself out of it, he hit send. The response came within 5 minutes. "Mr. Hart, excellent news. Your condition is not only acceptable, it's admirable. Report Monday morning at 8 a.m. to begin onboarding. We're lucky to have you. Welcome to the permanent team. CR." Daniel closed his laptop and sat in the quiet apartment, letting the reality sink in. He had a permanent job, benefits, security, a future that extended beyond the next contract. It felt terrifying and right in equal measure. He texted Elena. "I took the job." Her response was immediate. "I'm so glad. You deserve this, Daniel." Deserve is a strong word. It's the accurate word. You saved my career, caught a saboteur, and proved yourself invaluable to this company. That deserves recognition and stability. When you put it that way, I sound almost impressive. You are impressive. You just don't see yourself clearly. Daniel smiled at his phone. Same time next week for dinner? Actually, I was thinking maybe something different. Something during the day, casual. There's a children's museum in the city that I've always wanted to visit. If Mia would be interested, maybe all three of us could go. No pressure, and only if you think she's ready. The invitation was everything Daniel had been both hoping for and dreading. Elena wanting to meet Mia, wanting to be part of his real life instead of just the carefully curated version he presented over dinners. Let me talk to her first, see how she feels about it. Of course. Take your time. I meant what I said about no pressure. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for giving this a chance. I know it's not easy. Daniel set his phone down and walked to Mia's room one more time. She was sleeping peacefully, completely unaware that her father was standing at a crossroads, choosing between the safe isolation they'd lived in for 3 years and the uncertain possibility of something more. He thought about Sarah, about the dreams they'd had, about the life they'd planned to build together. She would have wanted him to be happy. She would have wanted Mia to grow up seeing that loss didn't have to mean the end of everything. And maybe, just maybe, she would have liked Elena. The thought didn't feel like a betrayal. It felt like permission. Saturday morning, Daniel made pancakes while Mia helped by mostly making a mess. They ate breakfast together while watching cartoons, and during a commercial break, Daniel muted the television. Hey, sweetheart, can we talk about something? Mia looked up from her pancakes. Is it about Elena? How did you know? Because you have your serious face on. And Mrs. Chen says when grown-ups make their serious face about happy things, it's usually about relationships. Daniel made another mental note to have a conversation with Mrs. Chen about boundaries. Elena asked if maybe you'd like to meet her. Go to a museum together, all three of us. But only if you want to. If you're not ready, that's completely okay. Mia tilted her head, considering. What kind of museum? A children's museum. Interactive exhibits, things you can touch and play with. Will there be dinosaurs? Probably. Then I want to go. Mia returned to her pancakes as if she'd just decided what to have for snack, not whether to meet her father's potential girlfriend. But Daddy. Yes? If I don't like her, we don't have to see her again, right? Daniel pulled Mia close. Right. You're my priority. Always. If this makes you uncomfortable, we stop. Okay? But I think I'll like her. She makes you happy. And people who make you happy are usually nice. The faith in those words, the trust that Daniel wouldn't bring someone into their lives who would hurt them, felt like both a gift and a tremendous responsibility. He texted Elena. Mia says yes to the museum, as long as there are dinosaurs. There are definitely dinosaurs. Does next Saturday work? It's perfect. I'm nervous. So am I. Good. That means this matters. Elena's words echoed what she'd said at dinner, and Daniel found himself smiling despite the butterflies in his stomach. Fear meant it mattered. Nervousness meant they were both invested in getting this right. He had a week to prepare Mia, to prepare himself, to figure out how to navigate the complicated intersection of his two worlds. But for now, on this Saturday morning, with pancakes and cartoons and his daughter's absolute trust, Daniel allowed himself to believe that maybe complicated wasn't the same as impossible. Maybe it was just the beginning of something worth fighting for. The week that followed moved with the strange duality of time before important events, simultaneously crawling and racing toward Saturday. Daniel started his permanent position at Vanguard on Monday morning, trading his basement server room for an actual office on the 15th floor with windows that overlooked the city and a nameplate that read Daniel Hart, head of cybersecurity. The change felt surreal. Catherine Reynolds personally walked him through the onboarding process, introducing him to department heads and board members who treated him with a respect he wasn't accustomed to receiving. He was no longer the invisible contractor who fixed problems in the middle of the night. He was now someone who sat in planning meetings, whose opinions shaped company policy, whose expertise was valued rather than simply utilized. Elena attended 2 of those meetings, and each time their eyes met across the conference table, Daniel felt that same electric awareness from the restaurant. But they kept things professional, limited their interactions to work-appropriate topics, and didn't mention the upcoming Saturday. Not in front of others, anyway. On Tuesday evening, after Daniel had picked up Mia from Mrs. Chen's and they'd finished dinner, his phone buzzed with a text from Elena. How's the new office? Strange. I keep expecting someone to tell me I'm in the wrong place. Imposter syndrome is normal. You'll adjust, says the woman who just got promoted to senior executive VP, who also has imposter syndrome. We can be frauds together. Daniel smiled at his phone and Mia noticed immediately. Is that Elena? Yes. What's she saying? Just asking about my new job. Mia climbed into Daniel's lap, peering at the phone screen. Can I say hi? Daniel hesitated, then typed, Mia wants to say hello. Elena's response came quickly. Tell her I said hi back, and that I'm looking forward to Saturday. Daniel showed Mia the message, and she dictated carefully, Tell her I'm excited too, and ask if the museum really has dinosaurs. Daniel typed the message, feeling oddly domestic about this exchange. Elena replied with a photo, a screenshot from the museum's website showing a massive T-Rex skeleton in the main hall. Mia's eyes went wide. That's huge! Daddy, can we go right now? Saturday, sweetheart, 4 more days. That's forever. It'll go faster than you think. But Mia's impatience turned out to be contagious. Daniel found himself counting down the days too, though his anticipation was mixed with nervousness that intensified as Saturday approached. He was about to introduce his daughter to someone who could potentially become important in both their lives. The weight of that responsibility felt enormous. On Thursday evening, Mrs. Chen cornered him in the hallway while Mia was occupied with her coloring books. So, she said, arms crossed in that way that meant she had opinions to share. You're dating your boss. I'm not dating anyone. We're going to a museum. With your daughter, which is more serious than dating. Mrs. Chen's expression softened. I'm not criticizing Daniel. I'm just making sure you know what you're doing. I have no idea what I'm doing. Good. That's honest. She patted his arm. Sarah would want you to be happy. She told me that, in the hospital, after Mia was born. Made me promise I'd kick your butt if you spent the rest of your life alone. Daniel felt his throat tighten. She said that. She knew she was dying. The doctors wouldn't say it, but she knew. And she was more worried about you than herself. Mrs. Chen's eyes were damp. So I'm keeping my promise. If this Elena makes you happy, don't sabotage it because you feel guilty about moving forward. What if it doesn't work out? What if Mia gets attached and then it falls apart? Then you deal with it, the same way you've dealt with everything else. But you don't avoid living because you're afraid of loss. That's not protecting Mia. That's teaching her that fear should dictate her choices. The words settled over Daniel like a weight and a liberation simultaneously. He'd spent 3 years building walls, convincing himself that isolation was protection. But maybe he'd been protecting himself more than Mia. When did you get so wise? He asked. I've always been wise. You just don't listen most of the time. Mrs. Chen smiled. Now go plan this museum trip and stop overthinking everything. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn weather that made Chicago beautiful. Clear skies, temperatures in the 60s, leaves turning gold and crimson across the city. Daniel helped Mia pick out an outfit, which turned into a fashion show of epic proportions as she modeled 5 different combinations before settling on jeans, a purple sweater, and the light-up sneakers she usually saved for special occasions. Do I look nice? She asked, examining herself critically in the mirror. You look perfect. What if she doesn't like me? The question stopped Daniel cold. He knelt down to Mia's level, taking her small hands in his. Sweetheart, anyone who doesn't like you is someone with terrible judgment. You're smart, funny, kind, and amazing. Elena already knows that because I've told her about you. You have? Of course, you're my favorite topic. Mia threw her arms around his neck. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, more than anything. They met Elena outside the Museum of Science and Industry at 11 o'clock exactly. She was waiting by the entrance, wearing jeans and a casual blue jacket, looking nothing like the executive Daniel was used to seeing in boardrooms. When she spotted them, her face lit up with a smile that seemed genuine and nervous in equal measure. Hi, she said as they approached. Hi, Daniel replied, suddenly feeling like a teenager on a first date, despite his daughter holding his hand. Elena looked down at Mia, and her smile gentled. You must be Mia. Your dad has told me so much about you. Mia studied Elena with the frank assessment that only children can pull off. You're the pretty lady from Daddy's work. Elena laughed, a sound full of delight. I suppose I am. And you're the artist who likes butterflies and makes terrible cookies. Mrs. Chen told you about the cookies? Your dad mentioned them. He said they were made with lots of enthusiasm. That's a nice way of saying they were bad. Mia seemed to come to some internal decision and released Daniel's hand to take Elena's instead. Can we see the dinosaurs now? Just like that, the ice was broken. The museum was everything Daniel had hoped it would be, engaging enough to keep Mia entertained, but not so overwhelming that she'd get overstimulated. They spent the first hour in the dinosaur exhibit, where Mia peppered Elena with questions about whether T-Rex really couldn't see you if you stood still, and how paleontologists knew what color dinosaurs were. Elena handled each question with patience and thoughtfulness, never talking down to Mia, but also not pretending to have answers she didn't. I think that's something we could look up together, she'd say. Or, what do you think? When Mia asked particularly philosophical questions about whether dinosaurs had feelings. Daniel found himself watching their interaction more than the exhibits, studying the way Elena naturally matched Mia's energy without forcing enthusiasm, the way she listened when Mia explained her elaborate theories about why the Triceratops was the best dinosaur. In the Mirror Maze exhibit, Mia ran ahead, giggling while Daniel and Elena followed at a slower pace, occasionally bumping into reflective walls. She's wonderful, Elena said quietly. Everything you described and more. She likes you, I can tell. How can you tell? Because she's holding your hand. She doesn't do that with strangers. Daniel navigated around a corner, nearly walking into his own reflection. And she hasn't asked to leave yet, which is her usual signal that she's not enjoying something. Elena smiled, but there was something vulnerable in her expression. I was terrified about today. I've given presentations to hostile board members and negotiated million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat. But meeting your 5-year-old daughter? Absolutely terrifying. You're doing great. I don't want to mess this up. Elena stopped walking, turning to face him in the maze of mirrors that reflected them from a dozen angles. I don't want to be someone who causes problems in her life or makes her feel like she has to share her father when she shouldn't have to. Daniel reached out, taking Elena's free hand, the one not holding Mia's. You're not causing problems? You're just someone who makes me remember what it feels like to want more than just survival. Boo! They stood there, surrounded by infinite reflections of themselves, and Daniel saw what they must look like to the outside world. A family. Not the family he'd planned, not the one he'd lost, but something new and unexpected and possibly real. Daddy! Elena! I found the exit! Mia's voice echoed through the maze. The moment broke, and they followed Mia's directions out of the mirror maze into the main hall, where the massive dinosaur skeleton stood sentinel over the museum. They had lunch at the museum cafe, where Mia declared her chicken fingers pretty good, but not as good as Daddy makes, and convinced Elena to try chocolate milk, which apparently Elena hadn't had since she was a child. This is incredible, Elena said after the first sip. How did I forget about chocolate milk? Because you're a grown-up, Mia explained patiently. Grown-ups forget about the good stuff. That's why they need kids to remind them. Is that why your dad needs you, to remind him about the good stuff? Mia nodded seriously. He forgets to have fun sometimes. He worries too much. I'm sitting right here, Daniel interjected. We know, Daddy. We're talking about you, not to you. Mia turned back to Elena. Do you worry too much too? Elena considered the question carefully. I think I do. I spend so much time working that I forget there are other things that matter. Like chocolate milk? Exactly like chocolate milk. After lunch, they explored the transportation exhibit, where Mia became fascinated by a model train setup that ran through a miniature city. She pressed her nose against the glass, tracking the tiny trains through tunnels and over bridges. Daniel stood beside Elena, close enough that their shoulders touched. Thank you for this, he said quietly. For making the effort, for being patient with her, for understanding that she comes first. She should come first. That's not something you need to apologize for. Elena watched Mia with an expression Daniel couldn't quite read. Can I tell you something? Of course. I've never wanted children. It wasn't some grand philosophical stance, just never felt like something that fit into my life plan. She paused. But watching you with Mia, seeing how you've built this entire existence around making sure she feels loved and secure, it makes me understand why people do it. Why they choose to put someone else's needs before their own. Some days it's a choice. Most days it's just instinct. Either way, it's beautiful. Elena turned to face him. I don't know where this thing between us is going, Daniel. I don't know if I can be what you and Mia need, but I want to try. If you'll let me. Before Daniel could respond, Mia ran back to them, grabbing both their hands. There's a submarine! Can we go inside, please? They toured the submarine, a massive U-505 that had been a German vessel in World War II. Mia was fascinated by the tight quarters and the periscope, insisting on looking through it multiple times to see the museum floor from the submarine's perspective. Everything looks different from inside, she observed. Like the same place, but secret. That's very philosophical, Elena said. What's philosophical mean? It means you're thinking deep thoughts. Mia seemed pleased by this. I think deep thoughts a lot. Daddy says I get it from Mommy. The mention of Sarah hung in the air for a moment, and Daniel tensed, waiting to see how Elena would react. But Elena just smiled gently. Your daddy talks about your mommy sometimes. She sounds like she was a wonderful person. I don't remember her much, Mia said matter-of-factly. But Daddy tells me stories. He says she would have loved me. I'm sure she did love you, very much. Mia nodded, accepting this, then spotted another exhibit and ran toward it. Daniel started to follow, but Elena caught his arm. Was that okay? What I said about Sarah? It was perfect. Daniel felt something unknot in his chest. Thank you for not pretending she didn't exist. She's part of who you are. Part of Mia's story. I'd never want to erase that. They spent another 2 hours exploring the museum, and by the time they emerged into the late afternoon sunlight, Mia was exhausted but happy, her hand firmly gripping Elena's. Can Elena come have dinner with us? Mia asked as they walked toward the parking lot. Daniel looked at Elena. You don't have to. I'd love to, Elena interrupted. If that's okay? We're not fancy. It'll probably be pasta and whatever vegetables I can convince Mia to eat. Pasta sounds perfect. They drove in separate cars to Daniel's apartment, and he felt a flutter of anxiety as he unlocked the door and let Elena into his modest home. It was clean but lived in, decorated with Mia's artwork and photographs and the accumulated clutter of a single father's life. It's not much, Daniel started to say. It's a home, Elena said, looking around with genuine interest. It's lovely. Mia gave Elena the grand tour, showing off her room and her extensive stuffed animal collection and the blanket fort she'd built in the living room that Daniel hadn't had the heart to take down yet. While Daniel cooked dinner, Elena and Mia sat at the kitchen table coloring together. Daniel listened to their conversation while he boiled pasta and prepared sauce. Mia explaining her elaborate artistic vision, Elena asking questions and adding her own contributions to the collaborative drawing. It felt startlingly domestic, like something from a life Daniel had stopped believing was possible. Mrs. Chen appeared at one point, ostensibly to return a dish she'd borrowed, but really to get a look at Elena. The two women sized each other up with the frank assessment of people who both cared about the same man, and after a brief conversation, Mrs. Chen gave Daniel a small nod of approval before leaving. Dinner was chaotic in the best way. Mia told Elena elaborate stories about her kindergarten class, including a dramatic recreation of the time another student brought a frog to show and tell and it escaped, causing widespread panic. Elena laughed in all the right places and seemed genuinely engaged, not just politely tolerant. After dinner, Mia started fading fast, the exhaustion of the museum catching up with her. Daniel carried her to bed while Elena cleaned up the kitchen, and when he returned, he found her washing dishes with the comfortable efficiency of someone who knew their way around a kitchen. You don't have to do that, he said. I know, but I want to. Elena rinsed a plate and set it in the drying rack. Today was amazing, Daniel. Thank you for letting me be part of it. Thank you for wanting to be part of it. Daniel picked up a towel and started drying. They worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes before he said, Mia really likes you. The feeling is mutual. She's incredible. Elena handed him another plate. Smart, funny, surprisingly wise for someone who's only been on the planet for 5 years. She's had to grow up faster than I would have liked. But you've made sure she grew up knowing she's loved. That's what matters. They finished the dishes, and Elena dried her hands on the towel Daniel offered. The kitchen felt smaller suddenly, the space between them charged with awareness. "I should probably go," Elena said, but she didn't move toward the door. "Probably," Daniel agreed, also not moving. They stood there in his small kitchen with the overhead light casting soft shadows, and Daniel felt the pull of something that had been building since that first night in Elena's office. "Can I see you again?" Elena asked. "Not at work. Not with Mia, unless you want that." "Just us?" "I'd like that." "Next weekend, there's a concert in Millennium Park. Nothing fancy, just music and the city." "Okay." Elena smiled, and it transformed her face from beautiful to radiant. "Okay." Daniel walked her to the door, and on the threshold, Elena turned back. For a moment, he thought she might kiss him, and his heart hammered in anticipation. But instead, she just touched his cheek gently, her fingers warm against his skin. "Today was perfect," she said softly. "All of it." Then she was gone, walking down the hallway toward the elevator, and Daniel was left standing in his doorway trying to process the fact that his carefully controlled life had just expanded to include someone who made him feel like maybe, possibly, he deserved to be happy. He checked on Mia one more time before bed and found her already asleep, Mr. Peanuts tucked under one arm. He kissed her forehead and whispered, "You did great today, sweetheart." In his own room, Daniel found a text from Elena waiting. "I made it home. Thank you again for today. Mia is wonderful. You're wonderful. I'm looking forward to next weekend." He typed back, "Me too." Then, feeling brave, "You were wonderful too." "Careful, Daniel Hart. If we keep complimenting each other, one of us might start believing we deserve it." "Maybe we do." "Maybe we do. Good night." "Good night, Elena." Daniel set his phone down and lay in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the city outside his window. For 3 years, he'd measured his life in terms of what he'd lost, what he was protecting, what he couldn't allow himself to want. But tonight, for the first time, he let himself think about what he might gain. The following week at work was different. Daniel and Elena maintained professionalism in meetings and public spaces, but there was an undercurrent of awareness that hadn't existed before. A shared smile during a tedious presentation, a brief touch of hands when passing documents, small moments that felt significant precisely because they were private. On Wednesday, Daniel was reviewing security protocols when his office phone rang. The caller ID showed it was an internal extension, but not one he recognized. "This is Daniel Hart. Mr. Hart, this is James Chen from Legal. I need you to come to my office immediately. We have a situation." Daniel's stomach dropped. "What kind of situation?" "I can't discuss it over the phone. Please come now." The legal department was on the 20th floor, a maze of cubicles and conference rooms that always made Daniel feel like he'd entered a different company entirely. James Chen's office was in the back corner, and through the glass walls, Daniel could see 2 other people waiting, both in suits that screamed federal law enforcement. This was bad. James stood when Daniel entered. "Mr. Hart, these are Agents Morrison and Kwan from the FBI's Cybercrimes Division. They have some questions about the incident involving Marcus Kane." The taller agent, Morrison, extended her hand. "Mr. Hart, thank you for coming. We're investigating allegations of corporate espionage related to the theft of proprietary information from Vanguard Financial." Daniel shook her hand, mind racing. "I provided all the evidence to the board. Everything is documented." "We've reviewed that evidence. It's actually why we're here." Agent Kwan pulled out a tablet. "The methodology used in the attack on Miss Brooks' files is consistent with tools developed by a hacking collective we've been tracking for 18 months. They specialize in corporate espionage, targeting executives, and extracting sensitive information for sale to competitors." "You think Marcus Kane was working with them?" "We think Mr. Kane was a client. Someone approached him, offered to help him obtain damaging information about Miss Brooks, and provided the software to execute the attack." Morrison pulled up a file on her tablet. "But here's where it gets interesting. The encryption protocol you used to protect Ms. Brooks's files. We've only seen that level of sophistication from one other source." Daniel felt ice form in his veins. "What source?" "A security contractor named Adrian Frost. Does that name mean anything to you?" It meant everything. Adrian Frost was the alias Daniel had used during his years working undercover for the private security firm. The identity he'd buried when Sarah died. The life he'd left behind to become just Daniel Hart, single father and invisible contractor. That was a long time ago, Daniel said carefully. We know who you used to be, Mr. Hart. Kwan's voice was neutral but firm. We also know you left that work behind for personal reasons. But the fact remains that you have skills and access that very few people possess, and we need your help. James Chen interrupted. My client doesn't have to cooperate with any investigation without proper legal counsel, and we're not investigating Mr. Hart, Morrison clarified. We're asking for his assistance in identifying and stopping the organization that provided Marcus Kane with the tools to attack Vanguard Financial. They're targeting multiple corporations, and based on the evidence you compiled, you might be the only person with the technical expertise to trace them. Daniel sat down heavily. I have a daughter. I can't go undercover, can't travel, can't do any of the things I used to do. We're not asking you to go undercover. We're asking you to consult. Review the evidence we've gathered, help us understand their methodology, maybe trace their digital footprints. Kwan leaned forward. You'd be working from here, regular hours, and you'd be compensated fairly. I need to think about this. Of course, but Mr. Hart, these people are dangerous. They're selling corporate secrets to the highest bidder, and eventually someone's going to get hurt when the wrong information ends up in the wrong hands. Morrison stood. We'll give you 48 hours to decide. If you're willing to help, contact me at this number. She handed Daniel a business card, and the agents left. James Chen waited until they were gone before speaking. You don't have to do this. Legally, you have no obligation to assist a federal investigation unless they subpoena you. But if I can help stop people from being victimized the way Elena almost was, then that's your decision to make. Just be aware of what you're agreeing to before you commit. Daniel left the legal office in a daze. He'd spent 3 years trying to be invisible, to leave behind the complicated and dangerous work of his past. And now that past was reaching out, asking him to step back into a role he'd sworn off. That evening, after Mia was in bed, Daniel called Elena. Hey, she answered, and he could hear the smile in her voice. I was just thinking about you. Good thoughts, I hope. The best. What's up? Daniel told her about the FBI visit, about the request for consultation, about the revelation that Marcus Kane had been working with a larger organization. Elena was quiet for a long moment. What do you want to do? I don't know. Part of me wants to help, but part of me remembers why I left that work behind, because it consumed everything, because it was dangerous, because it meant prioritizing investigations over being present for the people who needed me. But this wouldn't be like before, would it? They're asking for consultation, not field work. It starts with consultation. It always starts small. And then suddenly you're spending every waking hour chasing digital ghosts while your life falls apart around you. Daniel ran his hand through his hair. I can't do that to Mia. I can't do that to myself. Then don't. Elena's voice was firm. Tell them no. You don't owe the FBI anything, Daniel. You have a daughter and a job and a life that you've worked hard to build. Protecting that isn't selfish. But what if I'm the only one who can stop them? Then someone else will figure it out. The world doesn't rest on your shoulders alone. Daniel sat with that for a moment, letting the truth of it settle over him. For so long, he'd carried the weight of protecting everyone. Mia, Elena, the networks he secured, the people who depended on systems he built. But Elena was right. He didn't have to carry everything. Thank you, he said quietly, for reminding me that it's okay to say no. That's what I'm here for, to remind you that you're allowed to have boundaries. She paused. Are you still okay for this weekend, the concert? Absolutely. I need something to look forward to that isn't about corporate espionage or federal investigations. Then consider it a date. A real one this time. A real date, Daniel repeated, and despite the stress of the day, he found himself smiling. I can work with that. They talked for another hour about nothing important. Mia's upcoming kindergarten play, Elena's ongoing battles with restructuring implementation, the fact that Mrs. Chen had apparently decided Elena was acceptable and had extended an invitation for Sunday dinner. When they finally hung up, Daniel felt steadier, more grounded in the choices he was making. On Friday morning, he called Agent Morrison. I appreciate the offer, he said, but I have to decline. My daughter is my priority, and I can't take on consulting work that might expand into something more consuming. I'm sorry. Morrison was disappointed but professional. I understand, Mr. Hart. If you change your mind, the offer stands. After hanging up, Daniel felt a strange mix of relief and guilt. Relief that he'd protected his boundaries. Guilt that he'd turned away from potentially helping others. But when he picked up Mia from kindergarten that afternoon and she threw herself into his arms with absolute trust that he would always be there to catch her, Daniel knew he'd made the right choice. Some battles weren't his to fight. Some victories were simply showing up every day for the people who needed him most. And as he drove home with Mia singing off-key in the back seat, planning the weekend concert with Elena, and looking forward to whatever came next, Daniel realized that maybe that was enough. Maybe it was more than enough. Maybe it was everything. Saturday arrived with the promise of rain that Chicago weather forecasters had been predicting all week, but the sky remained stubbornly clear as Daniel drove toward Millennium Park. Mia was spending the day with Mrs. Chen, who had planned an ambitious baking project that would probably result in more flour on the floor than in whatever they were making. "You look nice, Daddy," Mia had said that morning while Daniel stood in front of his closet trying to decide what someone wore to an actual date. "Are you nervous?" "A little." "That's okay. Elena's probably nervous too." Mia had hugged him tight. "Have fun. You deserve to have fun." The wisdom of 5-year-olds, Daniel thought as he parked near the park entrance. When had his daughter become the one offering him reassurance about dating? Elena was waiting by the Cloud Gate sculpture, and Daniel's breath caught when he saw her. She wore a burgundy dress that moved with the wind, her hair loose around her shoulders, and she looked nothing like the executive who commanded boardrooms, and everything like someone he wanted to know in every possible way. "Hi," she said when he reached her, and there was something shy in her smile that made his heart race. "Hi." Daniel found himself suddenly uncertain about whether to hug her, shake her hand, or just stand there like an awkward teenager. Elena solved the problem by stepping forward and wrapping her arms around him in a brief but warm embrace that felt both natural and momentous. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she admitted as they started walking toward the concert pavilion. "Why wouldn't I?" "Because this is the part where it gets real, where we stop pretending this is just casual dinners and museum trips with your daughter." Elena glanced at him. "This is us saying we're actually trying something." Daniel took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "I'm here. I'm trying." The concert was an outdoor jazz ensemble, the kind of music that fit perfectly with autumn afternoons in city parks. They found seats on the lawn, sitting close enough that their shoulders touched, and for the first hour they simply listened to the music and watched the Chicago skyline catch the afternoon light. During the intermission, Elena pulled out a thermos of coffee she'd brought and 2 paper cups. "I figured we might need this. The temperature's dropping." Daniel accepted the cup gratefully, warming his hands around it. "You came prepared. I spent 3 years as a scout leader when I was younger. The motto stuck." Elena poured her own coffee. "Also, I wanted to impress you with my thoughtfulness." "Consider me impressed." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Elena said, "Can I ask you something personal?" "When you decided to help me that night, when you discovered the hack, what made you take that risk? You could have just reported it through official channels, protected yourself from any blowback." Daniel considered the question carefully. "Because you saw me, not the contractor in the basement, not the security guy who fixed problems, but me, the person behind the job title." He looked at her. "Most people at Vanguard don't know I exist. I'm invisible by design. But you always said good morning when you passed my workspace. You remembered my name. You treated me like I mattered. You do matter. I know that now. But back then I needed someone to remind me." Daniel set down his coffee. "And because watching Marcus Kane try to destroy you felt fundamentally wrong. You work harder than anyone in that building. You care about doing things right, not just doing things efficiently. Someone trying to sabotage that because they were too lazy to compete fairly made me angry." Elena's eyes were bright with emotion. "I'm glad you got angry. Otherwise I wouldn't be here right now." "Where would you be?" "Probably fired, definitely humiliated, and absolutely convinced that hard work doesn't matter when politics and sabotage win." She turned to face him fully. "You saved more than my career that night, Daniel. You saved my faith that integrity still counts for something. You would have figured it out eventually. Maybe. But I wouldn't have had you." Elena reached up and touched his cheek, the gesture echoing the one from her doorway weeks ago. And having you makes everything better. The music started again, but Daniel barely heard it. All his attention was focused on Elena, on the way the fading sunlight caught in her hair, on the warmth of her hand still resting against his face, on the question forming in his mind about whether this was the right moment or if he should wait. Elena made the decision for him. She leaned forward and kissed him, soft and tentative, a question more than a declaration. Daniel answered by pulling her closer, deepening the kiss into something that felt like falling and flying simultaneously. When they finally broke apart, Elena was smiling. "I've been wanting to do that since the night we had dinner." "Why didn't you?" "Because I was terrified. Because I thought maybe I was reading signals wrong. Because—" She laughed quietly. "Because I'm apparently capable of negotiating million-dollar deals without fear, but turn into a nervous wreck when it comes to kissing someone I actually care about." Daniel kissed her again, slower this time, letting himself feel the reality of this moment instead of overthinking it. When they separated, he rested his forehead against hers. "For the record," he said, "you weren't reading signals wrong." They stayed for the rest of the concert, but Daniel couldn't have described a single song if asked. His entire awareness was focused on Elena beside him, her hand in his, the occasional smile she'd give him that suggested she was equally distracted. After the concert ended, they walked through the park as dusk settled over the city. The streetlights were just beginning to flicker on, and the temperature had dropped enough that Elena shivered slightly. Daniel shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. "Very chivalrous," she teased. "What would Mia say?" "She'd say I was being a gentleman. She's very concerned with proper behavior." Daniel guided them toward a quieter path along the lake. "She asked me this morning if I was going to marry you." Elena stumbled slightly. "She what?" Apparently Mrs. Chen has been explaining relationship progression in age-appropriate terms, and Mia wanted to know where we were on the timeline. Daniel smiled at Elena's expression. "I told her we were at the seeing if we like each other stage." "And what did she say to that?" "She said she already knows we like each other because we both get smiley when we text." Daniel stopped walking, turning to face Elena. "She's not wrong." Elena pulled his jacket tighter around herself. "This is moving fast, isn't it? 3 weeks ago, I was your boss who you barely knew. Now we're talking about relationship timelines, and your daughter is asking about marriage. We can slow down if you want." "That's the thing. I don't want to slow down. That's what scares me." Elena looked out at the lake, where the city lights reflected on the dark water. "I spent my entire adult life building a career, convinced that relationships were something I'd get to eventually, someday when work calmed down. But work never calms down, and eventually never comes." "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying that meeting you and Mia has made me realize that maybe I've been using my career as an excuse to avoid the messy, complicated, terrifying parts of actually living." She turned back to him. "I'm saying that I want this, whatever this is, wherever it goes, even though it scares me." Daniel took both her hands in his. "It scares me too, because the last time I let someone in, I lost her, and I don't know if I could survive that kind of loss again. Neither of us can guarantee that we won't get hurt. That's the risk of caring about people." Elena squeezed his hands. "But I think the bigger risk is living our entire lives protecting ourselves from pain so thoroughly that we miss out on everything else." "When did you get so wise?" "I told you, therapy. 2 years of learning that my coping mechanisms were actually just elaborate avoidance strategies." She smiled. "Best money I've ever spent." They walked back to the parking area slowly, neither wanting the evening to end. When they reached Elena's car, she turned to face Daniel one more time. "Come home with me," she said, and before he could respond, she clarified, "Not for anything presumptuous, just to talk more, to not have this night end at a parking lot. I have a nice apartment with a terrible view and even worse coffee, and I want to share both with you." Daniel thought about Mia at home with Mrs. Chen, about the boundaries he'd carefully maintained, about all the reasons he should say no. Then he thought about Elena's words on the lawn. The bigger risk is missing out on everything else. "Okay," he said, "but I need to be home by 11. Mrs. Chen has a strict curfew for my romantic life." Elena laughed and kissed him quickly. 11 o'clock. I can work with that." Her apartment was everything she'd described. Modern, expensive, with floor-to-ceiling windows that showed more of the building next door than the city skyline. But it was also clearly lived in, with books stacked on every surface, and a kitchen that looked rarely used except for the expensive coffee maker that dominated the counter. Fair warning, I wasn't exaggerating about the coffee, Elena said, attempting to operate the machine. This thing cost a fortune and I still can't make it work properly. Daniel moved behind her, reaching around to adjust the settings. You're using the wrong grind setting. It needs to be finer for espresso. They stood like that for a moment, Daniel's arms bracketing Elena against the counter, both of them acutely aware of their proximity. Then the coffee machine beeped, breaking the tension, and they stepped apart with slightly nervous laughter. The coffee turned out to be excellent once properly brewed, and they settled on Elena's couch with their mugs, sitting close enough to touch, but maintaining a careful distance that acknowledged how easy it would be to cross lines they weren't quite ready to cross. Tell me about Sarah, Elena said suddenly. If you're comfortable, I feel like I should know about the woman who shaped so much of who you are. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, searching for words. She was brilliant and chaotic, and had this way of making everything feel like an adventure. We met in college. She was an art major. I was studying computer science. We had absolutely nothing in common except that we made each other laugh. How did you meet? She spilled coffee on my laptop in the library, ruined 3 months of coding for a project that was due the next day. Daniel smiled at the memory. I was furious. She was mortified. She insisted on buying me dinner to apologize, and somehow that dinner turned into 4 hours of talking about everything except the destroyed project. Love at first coffee spill? Something like that. We were young and stupid and convinced we'd figured out something everyone else had missed. He set down his mug. Then she got pregnant senior year and suddenly we had to be adults. Get married, find jobs, build stability for a child we hadn't planned. Did you resent it? Never. Scared, yes. Overwhelmed, absolutely. But Mia was wanted from the moment we knew she existed. Daniel's voice roughened. Sarah was so excited about being a mother. She had all these plans for things she wanted to teach Mia, places they'd go together. And then she died. And none of those plans mattered. Elena moved closer, taking his hand. I'm sorry you lost her, both of you. The worst part was that for a long time I was angry with her. Angry that she left me alone with a newborn I had no idea how to care for. Angry that she'd made plans she couldn't keep. Angry that she'd promised forever and only given me 4 years. Daniel looked at their joined hands. It took me a long time to forgive her for dying, which is insane because it wasn't her fault. Grief isn't rational, it just is. My therapist said the same thing. It took me 18 months to finally see someone, and another year to actually process what happened instead of just surviving day to day. He met Elena's eyes. That's why this is complicated. Not because I'm not over Sarah. I am, as much as anyone gets over losing someone they loved, but because I know how badly it can hurt, and I'm terrified of either of us experiencing that again. Elena was quiet for a long moment. Can I tell you what I see when I look at you and Mia? What? I see someone who loved deeply enough that the loss almost destroyed him, and instead of letting it make him bitter or closed off, he channeled everything into making sure his daughter grew up knowing she was loved unconditionally. I see someone who could have easily blamed the world for his pain, but instead just worked harder to protect the one piece of his wife he had left. Elena's voice was fierce. That's not someone broken by grief, Daniel. That's someone who survived it and came out stronger. I don't feel stronger most days. That's because you're the one living it. But from the outside, looking at what you've built, how you've raised Mia, the man you've become, you're extraordinary. Daniel pulled Elena closer, needing the contact, needing to believe that maybe she was right. She came willingly, settling against his chest while he wrapped his arms around her. What about you? He asked after a while. What made you into the woman who works 70-hour weeks and builds careers instead of relationships? Elena sighed. Fear, mostly. After my father died, I watched my mother disappear into grief. She loved him so much that when he was gone, there was nothing left of her except this hollow shell going through the motions. She paused. I swore I'd never love anyone that much, never give someone that kind of power over my existence. So you built walls, fortresses, worked constantly so I'd never have time to feel lonely, climbed the corporate ladder so I'd have achievements instead of relationships, convince myself that being successful was better than being happy. Elena shifted to look up at Daniel. And then you showed up and dismantled every wall I'd spent 20 years building just by being decent and competent and seeing me as a person instead of a position. I didn't mean to dismantle anything. That's what made it work. You weren't trying to fix me or change me. You just existed in my space and made me want to be more than my job title. They sat like that for a long time, wrapped up in each other, talking about hopes and fears and the complicated task of building something real when both of them had been broken by loss. At 10:45, Daniel reluctantly extracted himself from Elena's couch. I have to go. Mrs. Chen's curfew is non-negotiable. Elena walked him to the door, and they stood in the hallway for several minutes just kissing, neither wanting to be the first to pull away. Same time next week? Elena asked when they finally separated. Actually, I was thinking maybe you could come to Mia's kindergarten play on Tuesday. It's at 7, and she's playing a tree in a production about the seasons. She's very proud of her costume. Elena's face lit up. I would love that. Should I bring flowers? For a tree? Seems counterproductive. She laughed and kissed him again. I'll figure something out. Text me when you get home. Always. The drive back to his apartment felt surreal. Daniel's mind kept replaying moments from the evening. Elena's kiss, her words about him being extraordinary, the way she'd fit perfectly against his chest. For the first time in 3 years, he felt like he was building towards something instead of just surviving. Mrs. Chen was waiting in his apartment when he arrived, sitting in his living room reading a book. Good date? She asked without looking up. Very good. You have lipstick on your collar. Daniel glanced down and saw the faint burgundy smudge. We kissed. Obviously, Mrs. Chen set down her book. Are you happy? I think I'm getting there. Good. Sarah would be pleased. She stood and patted his arm on her way to the door. Don't overthink this, Daniel. You deserve to be loved. Mia deserves to see her father happy. And that woman clearly adores you both. After Mrs. Chen left, Daniel checked on Mia, fast asleep with flowers still in her hair from whatever baking disaster they'd created, and then stood at his bedroom window, looking out at the city. He thought about Agent Morrison's offer, about the choice he'd made to prioritize his daughter over helping catch cybercriminals. Part of him still felt guilty about that decision, but a larger part recognized that he'd spent 3 years defining himself by what he'd lost and what he was protecting, never allowing space for what he might gain. On Tuesday evening, Daniel and Mia arrived at the kindergarten early to help with setup. Mia's tree costume was elaborate, brown pants and shirt with green streamers attached to represent leaves and a headband with cardboard branches that kept sliding down over her eyes. I look silly, she complained as Daniel adjusted the headband for the 5th time. You look like the most beautiful tree in the forest. Trees can't be beautiful. They're just trees. Wrong. Trees are very beautiful. They provide shade and oxygen and homes for birds. Mia considered this. Is Elena coming? She is. She texted that she's on her way. Good. I want her to see my costume. Mia paused, then asked in a small voice, Daddy, is Elena going to be my new mommy? Daniel knelt down to Mia's level, adjusting her costume while he searched for the right words. Elena is someone I care about very much, and someone who cares about you. But we're taking things slowly, figuring out what our family might look like. So maybe someday? Maybe someday. Would that be okay with you? Mia threw her arms around his neck. I want you to be happy, Daddy. And Elena makes you happy. That's enough for me. The simplicity of that acceptance, the pure generosity of a 5-year-old heart, made Daniel's eyes burn with unshed tears. Elena arrived 10 minutes before the play started, slightly breathless and carrying a small gift bag. She found Daniel and Mia backstage, where chaos reigned as kindergarten teachers tried to organize 20 overexcited children into some semblance of order. Sorry I'm late, meeting ran over. Elena handed the bag to Mia. I brought you something. Mia opened the bag and pulled out a small stuffed owl with a card attached. Why an owl? Because owls are wise, and they live in trees, and I thought your tree might like a friend. Elena smiled. Also because you're one of the wisest people I know, even if you're only 5. Mia hugged the owl tight, then surprised everyone by hugging Elena just as tightly. "Thank you, I love it." Elena looked stunned and delighted in equal measure, her arms automatically wrapping around Mia. Over his daughter's head, her eyes met Daniel's, and he saw everything he felt reflected there: hope, fear, possibility, and the fragile beginning of something that could become extraordinary if they were brave enough to let it. The play itself was exactly what kindergarten productions always are: chaotic, adorable, and featuring at least 3 children who forgot their lines and 2 who were more interested in waving at their parents than performing. Mia stood perfectly still as her tree, occasionally rustling her leaf streamers when the narrator mentioned wind, and Daniel had never been more proud of anything in his life. After the performance, they went for ice cream despite the cool November evening. Mia monopolized the conversation, talking excitedly about the play and her new owl friend and the fact that another tree had stepped on her foot during the finale. "But I didn't cry," she said proudly. "Because trees are strong." "Trees are very strong," Elena agreed. "Just like you." They dropped Mia off at home with Mrs. Chen, who took one look at Elena and invited her for Sunday dinner with a tone that suggested refusal wasn't an option. Then Daniel and Elena sat in his car outside the apartment building, neither wanting the evening to end. "Your daughter is amazing," Elena said. "The way she performed, the way she talks, everything about her just radiates joy." "That's all her. I just try to keep up." "You do more than keep up. You've given her security and love and the confidence to be exactly who she is." Elena took his hand. "I meant what I said before, Daniel. You're extraordinary." "So are you. Coming to a kindergarten play, bringing thoughtful gifts, winning over my daughter and my neighbor in the same week? That's pretty impressive." Elena laughed. "Your neighbor terrifies me. She looks at me like she's calculating whether I'm worthy of you." "She does that with everyone. You passed inspection the first time you met." "How can you tell?" "Because she invited you to Sunday dinner. That's her seal of approval." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Elena said, "I have to go to New York next week for a conference. 3 days, completely unavoidable. I'm going to miss you." "We'll survive 3 days." "I know, but I've gotten used to seeing you, talking to you, knowing you're just a floor away at work." She squeezed his hand. "Is that too clingy?" "I feel like I'm being too clingy." "You're not clingy. You're present. There's a difference." "Is this what normal relationships feel like? Because I have no frame of reference." Daniel brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "I think normal relationships probably have less corporate sabotage and FBI involvement in their origin story. But other than that, yeah, this feels pretty normal." "Good normal or bad normal?" "The best normal I've experienced in a very long time." Elena leaned across the console and kissed him, slow and deep, the kind of kiss that made Daniel forget they were parked outside his apartment building where Mrs. Chen could probably see them from her window. "I should go," Elena said when they finally broke apart. "Early meeting tomorrow. Text me when you get home." "Always." Daniel watched her drive away, then sat in his car for a few extra minutes, processing the evening. Somewhere in the past month, his life had transformed from careful routine into something unpredictable and scary and full of possibility. He was dating his boss. His daughter was bonding with a woman who might become important in both their lives. He'd turned down the FBI to protect the boundaries he'd built, and instead of feeling trapped by those choices, Daniel felt free. The following week passed in a blur of work and single parenting, and texted conversations with Elena while she was in New York. She sent photos of her hotel room, the conference, the terrible room service she'd ordered at midnight. Daniel sent back pictures of Mia's latest artwork and updates on the cybersecurity protocols he was implementing. On Wednesday night, Elena called instead of texting. "I miss you," she said without preamble. "Is that ridiculous? We've only been dating for a few weeks and I miss you like I've known you for years." "It's not ridiculous. I miss you too." "How's Mia?" "Currently staging an elaborate protest against eating vegetables. She's built a barricade out of cushions and is declaring independence from broccoli." Elena's laugh echoed through the phone. "Is she winning?" "She's 5. She always wins." Daniel glanced toward the living room where Mia was indeed fortified behind a wall of throw pillows. "But we've negotiated a peace treaty involving ice cream if she eats at least 3 pieces of broccoli." "Solid diplomatic work." "I'm learning from the best." You negotiate with hostile board members. I negotiate with a hostile kindergartner. Similar skill sets. They talked for another hour about everything and nothing, and by the time they hung up, Daniel felt the same certainty he'd felt outside the kindergarten, that this was real, that it mattered, that whatever they were building was worth the risk. Elena returned from New York on Thursday, and Friday evening they had dinner at a small Italian restaurant in her neighborhood. Over pasta and wine, water for Daniel, who was driving, Elena told him about the conference, about the contacts she'd made, about the strategies she was developing for Vanguard's continued restructuring. You light up when you talk about your work, Daniel observed. It's not just a job for you. It never has been. That was always the problem. I used work to fill every gap in my life, until work was my entire life. She set down her fork. But being with you and Mia has shown me that maybe there's room for both. Maybe I can be excellent at my career and also have people I care about. Revolutionary concept. For me it is. Elena reached across the table, taking his hand. I want you to know that this, us, what we're building, it's not secondary to my career. It's not something I'm fitting in around the margins. You matter, Daniel. You and Mia both matter more than any promotion or board meeting or restructuring plan. Daniel felt the weight of those words, the commitment implicit in them. That's a big statement. I know, and I'm scared saying it will somehow curse us or make you run away. But I need you to know where I stand. I'm not running anywhere. I'm right here, just as scared as you are, just as uncertain about what comes next. He squeezed her hand. But I'm here, Elena, for whatever that's worth. It's worth everything. They finished dinner and walked through Elena's neighborhood, bundled against the late November chill. Chicago was heading toward winter, the trees bare and the wind carrying promises of snow. Daniel had always loved this time of year, the way the city transformed, the holidays approaching, the sense of endings making way for new beginnings. Come home with me tonight, Elena said as they reached her building. Actually stay this time. No curfew, no rushing off, just us. But Daniel thought about Mia, safe with Mrs. Chen, about the boundaries he'd maintained, about all the reasons he'd spent 3 years protecting himself from exactly this kind of vulnerability. Then he thought about Sarah's words that Mrs. Chen had shared. Don't spend your life alone. Okay, he said. Let me just call Mrs. Chen and make sure she's good with Mia staying over. Mrs. Chen answered on the second ring. It's about time, she said when Daniel explained. That girl is fine here. Take care of yourself for once. Daniel ended the call and looked at Elena, who was watching him with a mixture of hope and nervousness. I'm all yours, he said. Elena smiled, took his hand, and led him inside. The next morning, Daniel woke in Elena's bed with sunlight streaming through the windows and Elena curled against his side, still sleeping. He lay there for a long moment, processing the significance of this step they'd taken, the intimacy they'd shared, the trust implicit in spending the night together. Elena stirred, opening her eyes to find him watching her. Hi, she said sleepily. Hi. Any regrets? None. You? Only that we didn't do this sooner. She stretched and settled back against his chest. What time is it? Daniel checked his phone. 8:30? And I have 7 texts from Mia asking when I'm coming home. Duty calls? Unfortunately, he kissed her forehead. But I'll see you tomorrow. Sunday dinner with Mrs. Chen, remember? How could I forget? I've been warned that her standards are exacting and her judgment is final. Daniel laughed. She's already decided she likes you. The dinner is just to make it official. They took their time getting ready, moving around each other in Elena's apartment with the comfortable intimacy of people who'd crossed a threshold together. When Daniel finally left, Elena walked him to the door and kissed him goodbye with a tenderness that made his chest ache. Thank you for staying, she said. Thank you for asking. See you tomorrow? Wouldn't miss it. Sunday dinner at Mrs. Chen's apartment was exactly as elaborate and slightly chaotic as Daniel had predicted. The table was laden with enough food to feed 20 people, though only 4 would be eating. Daniel, Mia, Elena, and Mrs. Chen herself. Mia had helped with the cooking, which meant there were decorative touches everywhere that only a 5-year-old would consider aesthetic improvements. Welcome to the chaos, Daniel murmured to Elena as they entered. But Elena handled it perfectly, complimenting Mrs. Chen's cooking, admiring Mia's table decorations, and settling into the domestic warmth like she'd been part of it for years. Over dinner, Mrs. Chen interrogated Elena with the skill of someone who'd raised 6 children and had strong opinions about who was worthy of the people she cared about. But she did it kindly, with genuine interest in Elena's answers rather than looking for reasons to disapprove. "So what are your intentions with Daniel?" Mrs. Chen asked bluntly about halfway through the meal. Elena didn't hesitate. "To love him, if he'll let me. To be part of his and Mia's lives in whatever way makes sense for their family. To support them and be supported by them." She glanced at Daniel. "And to not screw this up by overthinking or letting my career consume everything like it usually does." Mrs. Chen nodded approvingly. "Good answer. Now help me clear the table." While they cleaned up, Daniel and Mia worked on a puzzle in the living room. Through the kitchen doorway, he could hear Mrs. Chen and Elena talking in low voices, though he couldn't make out the words. "I like her, Daddy," Mia said, fitting a puzzle piece into place. "She's nice and she's smart and she makes you smile. She makes me very happy." "Are you going to marry her?" Daniel set down his puzzle piece. "Someday, maybe, if that's what we both want and what makes sense for our family." Mia considered this with her characteristic seriousness. "I think you should. Then she could live with us and we could be a real family." "We're already a real family, sweetheart, just you and me." "I know. But it would be nice to have someone else too. Someone who loves us both." Mia looked up at him with those wise, dark eyes. "I think Mommy would like Elena. Don't you?" Daniel pulled Mia into his lap, hugging her tight. "Yeah, sweetheart. I think she would." The dinner ended with promises to do it again soon, and Mrs. Chen extracting a commitment from Elena to attend Thanksgiving dinner, which was still 3 weeks away but apparently required advanced planning. As they left, Mrs. Chen pulled Daniel aside. "She's good for you," she said quietly. "Sarah would approve." "You really think so?" "I know so. Sarah wanted you to be happy. This woman makes you happy. That's all that matters." Daniel hugged Mrs. Chen tight, grateful beyond words for this woman who'd stepped into their lives and refused to let him navigate grief alone. The following weeks passed in a blur of work, family time, and the growing certainty that what he and Elena were building was real and lasting. They had their second official date, then their third, and somewhere along the way stopped counting because it felt less like dating and more like building a life together. Thanksgiving arrived with all the chaos Daniel had come to expect from holidays with Mrs. Chen. The apartment was packed with neighbors, friends, and people Mrs. Chen had apparently adopted over the years. Elena fit seamlessly into the celebration, helping in the kitchen and entertaining Mia and accepting second helpings of everything because Mrs. Chen wouldn't accept no for an answer. During a quiet moment on Mrs. Chen's small balcony, Elena wrapped in Daniel's jacket against the cold. She said, "I've been thinking about something." "What?" "My lease is up in January, and I'm paying a fortune for an apartment I barely spend time in because I'm always either at work or at your place." She looked at him. "What would you think about me looking for something closer to your neighborhood? Maybe even the same building if there's availability?" Daniel's heart raced. "That's a big step." "I know, and I'm not suggesting we move in together or anything that fast. Just that maybe being closer would make sense. Make it easier for us to see each other, for me to spend time with Mia." She paused. "But if it's too much too soon..." "It's not too much." Daniel pulled her closer. "I think it's perfect. Mia would love having you nearby. I would love having you nearby." "Yeah? Yeah." Elena kissed him, and through the sliding glass door, Daniel could see Mia watching them with Mrs. Chen, both of them smiling. Christmas came and went in a flurry of decorations, presents, and Mia's absolute conviction that Santa had somehow known exactly what she wanted despite her constantly changing wish list. Elena joined them for Christmas morning, bearing gifts she'd clearly spent considerable time selecting: books for Mia, a new laptop bag for Daniel, and for both of them, a framed photograph she'd had taken of the 3 of them at the museum that first day. "So we remember where we started," she said when Daniel opened it. He pulled her into a kiss right there in front of Mia and Mrs. Chen and the pile of wrapping paper, not caring who saw or what they thought. By New Year's Eve, Elena had found an apartment 2 floors above Daniel's in the same building. They spent the evening helping her move boxes and furniture, with Mia supervising by telling everyone where things should go and whether the furniture arrangement was aesthetically pleasing. At midnight, they stood on Elena's new balcony watching fireworks over the lake while Mia slept on the couch inside, exhausted from the day's activities. "Happy New Year," Elena said, wrapped in Daniel's arms. "Happy New Year." He kissed her as the fireworks painted the sky in colors. "Thank you for taking a chance on the invisible contractor in the basement. Thank you for seeing the workaholic executive hiding behind corporate restructuring plans." Elena turned in his arms to face him. "I love you, Daniel Hart. I've loved you since the night you saved my career, maybe even before that. And I love your daughter, and your life, and everything that comes with being part of this family." Daniel felt his eyes burn with tears he didn't bother hiding. "I love you too. I didn't think I'd ever say those words to anyone again, but here we are." "Here we are," Elena echoed. They stood like that, holding each other while the city celebrated around them, and Daniel thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment, the crisis that had forced him out of invisibility, the choice to help when he could have walked away, the courage to open himself to the possibility of love after loss. 3 months ago, he'd been the quiet technician in the server room, protecting systems and hiding from life. Now he was standing on a balcony with a woman he loved, building a future he hadn't dared to imagine. The next morning, Mia came running up the stairs to Elena's apartment, bursting through the door with Mrs. Chen trailing behind apologetically. "Daddy, Elena, I had the best dream." Mia launched herself at both of them. "We were all together, and we were a real family, and it was perfect." Elena knelt down to Mia's level. "Want to know a secret? I don't think that was a dream. I think that was real." "Really?" "Really? Because your dad and I love each other, and we both love you, and that makes us a family. Maybe not the traditional kind, but definitely the real kind." Mia threw her arms around Elena's neck. "I love you too." Over Mia's head, Elena's eyes met Daniel's, and he saw his entire future reflected there. Not the future he'd planned when Sarah was alive, not the lonely survival he'd resigned himself to after she died, but something new and unexpected and beautiful. "So," Mrs. Chen said from the doorway, "now that we've established everyone loves everyone, who wants pancakes? I brought supplies." They spent the morning cooking together in Elena's new kitchen, making a mess and laughing and building the kind of memories that would become the foundation of their family story. And when Daniel looked around at the people gathered in that small space, his daughter, the woman he loved, the neighbor who'd become family, he realized that sometimes the best things in life come from the crises we survive, and the courage to stay visible even when hiding would be easier. That evening, after Mia had returned home with Mrs. Chen and Elena's apartment had been cleaned of pancake batter and flour, Daniel and Elena sat on her couch watching the city lights. "I have something for you," Elena said, pulling a small box from her pocket. "It's not an engagement ring or anything presumptuous like that. Just something I wanted you to have." Daniel opened the box and found a key. "Is this?" "To my apartment, so you don't have to knock, so you can come and go whenever you want, so we can really start building this life together." Elena took his hand. "I know we're taking things slowly, and I respect that, but I want you to know you have a place here. Always." Daniel kissed her, pouring everything he felt into that connection. When they broke apart, he pulled out his own key from his pocket. "Great minds think alike," he said, handing it to her. "Welcome home, Elena Brooks." She laughed through tears, taking the key and holding it like it was precious. "Welcome home, Daniel Hart." And there, in the quiet of a Chicago January evening, two people who'd been broken by loss and built walls against pain chose instead to build something new together. Not perfect, not without fear, but real and lasting and worth every risk they'd taken to get there. Daniel thought about that night in Elena's office, when he'd made the choice to help instead of staying invisible. That single decision had changed everything, saved Elena's career, exposed corporate sabotage, and ultimately led him to this moment. Sometimes the biggest changes in life come from the smallest choices to be brave when staying safe would be easier. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, being brave leads you exactly where you need to be. Right here, right now, right home.